The damaged, ancient talisman's appearance had undergone a complete transformation. Yet Xianyun, who was a supreme talisman formation grandmaster, recognized with a brief scan that the ancient talisman that was completely round like a full moon and snow-white like jade was the ancient talisman that he'd studied bitterly for hundreds of years yet came up empty-handed. This could be discovered from the talisman markings that densely covered the surface of the ancient talisman. The talisman markings that were dense like the stars in the universe weren't damaged any longer, and they were flawless like a piece of art carved by the hands of God and were filled with an indescribably mysterious aura. This sort of aura seemed as if it possessed magical charm that caused Xianyun's mind to be instantly drawn by it and become immersed within it. His expression gradually transformed from the pleasant surprise it revealed at the beginning to an expression of wonder, and it finally transformed into shock. He heaved a light sigh after a long time and muttered, "Marvelous, truly marvelous. If I'm able to completely comprehend the writing of fiend gods on it, then it would be sufficient to improve my understanding in the Tao of Talismans by a level." As he finished speaking, his voice carried extreme excitement. On the other hand, Wu Yuan and Wu Sun had always been paying attention to the change in Xianyun's expression, and when they heard Xianyu say this, they instantly understood that Xianxia had really repaired the damaged ancient talisman. When they thought up to here, both of them couldn't help but feel slightly embarrassed when they recalled the scene of them bitterly persuading Xianxia. This was too unexpected. Who could have imagined that an ancient talisman which the Four Divinity Academy was helpless against would actually be successfully repaired by a young man at the initial stage of the heavenly immortal realm? But right after that, both of them were excited. The repair of the ancient talisman meant that Xianxia would be able to rely on this to obtain the assistance of the Four Divinity Academy. And this helped them deal with an extremely difficult problem as well. "Senior Xianyun, has he succeeded?" asked Wu Yuan. Xianyun nodded and took a deep breath while the gaze he looked at Xianxia with fully revealed his admiration as he said, "Young Master Xianxia really is extraordinary. With this ancient talisman as proof, my Four Divinity Academy will surely not remain indifferent towards what young Master Xianxia has encountered. All of you wait a moment. I'll go contact the experts of the Academy right away." As he spoke, he'd already turned around and left with large strides, and he revealed an excited expression as if he'd obtained a precious treasure. Xianxia heaved a sigh of relief in his heart when he saw this because Xianyun had obviously not truly seen through the profundities of the ancient talisman. So Xianyun hadn't noticed that the most precious thing contained within the ancient talisman had been obtained by Xianxia. Xianxia hadn't concealed this intentionally. The key was that the inheritance of the Nethergod Nine Cauldron form was a brand of comprehension, and it was utterly impossible to pass down. Moreover, he hadn't comprehended it completely, so he was unable to pass this inheritance down to another as well. Never mind, I'll take it as owing him a favor, and I'll return it when I have the chance. Xianxia pondered briefly before he decided. Xianyun returned not long after while beaming from ear to ear, and he smiled to Xianxia as he said, "It's done. The experts of my Four Divinity Academy will converge with me in less than a day. Let's leave right now." "So young Master Xianxia can leave with us? Awesome." The nearby Wu Sun was delighted and said, "In this way, I can consult young Master Xianxia regarding some things in the Tao of Talismans on the way. This is simply one of the greatest joys of life." Wu Sun was a young man that was crazy about the Tao of Talismans. After he'd witnessed Xianxia's miraculous performances, he'd taken Xianxia to be an expert in the Tao of Talismans, so being able to travel alongside Xianxia naturally had an extraordinary meaning to him. Wu Yuan couldn't help but roar with laughter and reveal a gratified expression when he saw his son so delighted. And if his son was able to become friends with Xianxia, then it naturally couldn't be any better. As an outstanding businessman, he was naturally clearly aware of how great the value of Xianxia's potential was. Even though Xianxia was currently in an extremely dangerous situation, yet he was able to kill a mysterious immortal after he just ascended into the immortal dimension. Moreover, his attainments in the Tao of Talismans was something that even a teacher of the Four Divinity Academy was inferior to. Most importantly, he was still so young. So long as such a young man was given time to grow, it would be sufficient for him to shine brilliantly in the future and become a great figure that held a decisive role in the immortal dimension. Xianxia didn't know the thoughts of Wu Yuan and Wu Sun, and his feelings eased up when he heard he was finally able to leave the Eastern Peace continent. He felt that he finally caught a break and wasn't so unfortunate as he was in the past few days. All of them immediately stopped wasting time. Xianyun prepared a bronze-treasured carriage and brought Xianxia and Wuxia with him as he left the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion after bidding farewell to Wuan. At this moment, at the third floor of a restaurant that stood opposite to the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion, Sun Hong and the two young men were sitting by the window while their expressions were slightly gloomy. They'd been waiting here for 5 days now, yet the target seemed to have vanished after entering the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion, and he hadn't taken a step out ever since. During this period of time, they'd gone to the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion to investigate on many occasions. Unfortunately, they didn't obtain any valuable information. My lord, could the target have fled secretly? A young man couldn't help but ask. Didn't you notice that the Cloud Ray Sect's Xianxia has been sending people to watch the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion during the past few days? Sun Hong grunted coldly. As a local expert of Cloud Ray City, if Xianxia wasn't able to keep his eyes on a little fellow at the initial stage of the heavenly immortal realm, then would he have any face to continue holding the position of elder in the Cloud Ray Sect? So in this way, could it be that the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion intends to protect that kid? Said the other young man. Sun Hong's gaze flickered as he pondered deeply without end. He was exactly unable to determine this. Logically speaking, even though the forces of the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion was scattered throughout the immortal dimension, this was Cloud Ray City after all. It was the territory of the Eastern Peace continent. If the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion was smart, it ought to not be stupid to the point of risking possibly offending the immortal monarch's estate for the sake of protecting a wanted villain. But according to the current situation, the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion might really be stupid. Could it be that something has occurred in there? Right during the moment he was in deep contemplation, Sun Hong suddenly noticed a bronze-treasured carriage leaving the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion, and Administrator Wu Yuan that had always stayed far behind the scenes had actually personally sent it off. That seems to be the treasured carriage of that great figure from the Four Divinity Academy. I heard that he took Administrator Wu Yuan's son, Wu Sun, as a student of the academy a few days ago. One of the young men said, "This matter has given rise to much discussion in Cloud Ray City now. After all, the Four Divinity Academy is a first-rate power even in the entire immortal dimension, and Wu Yuan's son is absolutely like a fish that jumped through the Dragon Gate by entering the academy. His accomplishments in the future are limitless." The other young man said with a slightly envious tone, "Yeah, the Four Divinity Academy is a paradise for the Tao of Talismans in the immortal dimension, and its influence extends to all 4,900 continents of the immortal dimension. All that are capable of entering it are extraordinary figures. Do you still remember the Azure Soul Divine Jade that kid sold that day?" asked Sun Hong abruptly. The two young men were stunned, and then they nodded. They naturally remembered that it was one of the 5 precious immortal treasures, and it was a rare immortal material used to refine valiant-grade immortal artifacts, so how could they forget it? Then if that kid handed the Azure Soul Divine Jade to that great figure from the Four Divinity Academy, don't you think he'll be able to obtain that great figure's protection? Sun Hong's gaze blazed as he asked. The two young men pondered briefly before they glanced at each other, and they both felt that it was possible. "Come, we'll pursue them from behind and investigate. Even if we offend that great figure, we can absolutely not allow that kid to escape from under our noses." Sun Hong decided immediately. In the next moment, the three of them had left the restaurant, and they distinguished the direction before surging through the crowd and vanishing. Sun Hong is quite discerning. At the same time, Zhang Zichuan immediately stood up on the 4th floor of the restaurant, and he said unhurriedly, "Come, let's follow them as well." The mantis stalks the cicada while unaware of the oriole behind it. "We'll play the part of the oriole today. Master, what if we enter into conflict with the members of the immortal monarch's estate?" Zhao Cheng couldn't refrain himself from asking. "We'll each depend on our own ability. In the territory of our Cloud Ray sect, that wanted criminal should naturally be captured by us because only in this way would we be able to obtain Immortal Monarch Lin Hao's reward. Right?" Zhang Zichuan spoke in a casual manner and seemed to be fully assured of his success. "Thank you, master." Zhao Cheng cupped his fists and thanked. He knew very well that his master was actually doing all of this for the sake of helping him vent his hatred. "Oh, you. Be at ease and enter into closed-door cultivation once we capture this kid, and try your best to improve your rankings on the continent Xianxia rankings. In this way, you wouldn't disappoint my intentions to foster you." Zhang Zichuan shook his head and didn't speak any further before he left the restaurant with Zhao Cheng. Over 150 kilometers outside the southeast entrance of Cloud Ray City. This was in spacious forest with luxurious branches and leaves that were extremely verdant and cast a shade onto the ground. But at this moment, the forest was filled with the smell of blood. On the ground was even 3 corpses, 2 young men and a middle-aged man. Shockingly, they were Sun Hong and his 2 subordinates. When Zhang Zichuan arrived here with Zhao Cheng and saw this scene, his pupils couldn't help but constrict as he gasped, and he almost didn't dare believe his eyes. That's the members of the Immortal Monarch's estate. They actually died here in such a short period of time. Who would have the audacity to do this? Zhao Cheng's face turned pale while he swallowed a mouthful of saliva with great difficulty. Zhang Zichuan's expression changed indeterminately as well, and then he seemed to have realized something, causing him to suddenly cry out, "Let's go!" As he spoke, he intended to turn around and leave. But right at this moment, a robust figure led a group of black-clothed people to swiftly appear in the surrounding forest, and they completely sealed off Zhang Zichuan and Zhao Cheng's paths of retreat. "Administrator Wu?" Zhang Zichuan couldn't help but be stunned when he saw the appearance of the person in the lead. He originally thought it was the great figure from the 4 Divinity Academy that had killed Sun Hong's group, yet he was obviously wrong. The assailant was obviously the administrator of the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion, Wu Yuan. Why? Zhang Zichuan's heart fell to rock bottom because since Wu Yuan dared to openly reveal his figure, Wu Yuan obviously didn't intend to let Zhang Zichuan or Zhao Cheng go. "For the sake of my son's future." At this moment, Wu Yuan seemed to be icy cold and indifferent, and he said with an expressionless face, "Cloud Ray City is too small, the Eastern Peace Continent is too small as well. My son's future shouldn't be restrained here because he would be like a frog in a well that was looking up at the sky. So before he leaves, I as his father should naturally help him eliminate some future troubles. You ought to be aware that our target isn't your son." Zhang Zichuan's frowned as he said in a low voice, yet the uneasiness in his heart grew deeper. Wu Yuan's expression became even more indifferent as he said, "Your target might affect my son's future. Even though it's merely a possibility, yet it's sufficient for me to do all of this. Not to mention I owe him an enormous favor that I haven't repaid." As soon as he finished speaking, Wu Yuan waved his hand. The battle erupted. After a short moment, the number of corpses in the luxuriant forest had increased by 2. Wu Yuan stood with his hands behind his back while he silently gazed at Zhang Zichuan and Zhao Cheng on the ground that had died miserably, and he muttered after a long time, "Don't blame me for being ruthless. For the sake of my son's future, I even dared to kill members of the Immortal Monarch's estate, let alone the 2 of you? The Cloud Ray sect? Haha, that's merely a local tyrant of a city." Without wasting any more time here, Wu Yuan waved his hand before he left. Those black-clothes people behind him started to deal with the corpses and traces of blood on the ground in an orderly manner. Their methods were experienced, and it was obviously not the first time that they'd done something like this. In merely a short moment, the luxuriant forest had been cleaned completely, and not a single clue could be found. On this day, the Cloud Ray sect's 3rd elder, Zhang Zichuan, and his closed-door disciple, Zhao Cheng, vanished as if they'd evaporated into the air. At the same time, the news of the disappearance of the Immortal Monarch's estate's commander Sun Hong and his 2 subordinates spread through the city as well. "My lord, Commander Sun Hong's sulfate tablet has shattered. Who did it? It's unknown." The report Commander Sun Hong sent a day before he vanished came from Cloud Ray City, and he probably found the target Chun Shi. As for the reason of his death and his corpse, we haven't obtained any information until now. Oh, but according to reliable information, the greatest suspicion probably lies on one of the teachers of the 4 Divinity Academy, Xianyun. Xianyun. Exactly. The Cloud Ray sect's third elder, Zhang Zichuan, and his disciple Zhao Zheng vanished alongside Commander Sun Hong, and that day just happened to be the day Xianyun left Cloud Ray City. The teachers of the Four Divinity Academy are all talisman formation grandmasters with lofty statuses and hold themselves aloof from the world. They probably wouldn't carry out such ruthless actions. So, could it be that it was someone else? The only party left is the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion. The target stayed for a few days in the Cloud Ray City's Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion, and Commander Sun Hong vanished while monitoring the events occurring in the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion. The Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion truly is slightly troublesome. No matter if it's the Four Divinity Academy or Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion, so long as they're involved in this matter, then even the Lord Immortal Monarch would probably find it to be a headache. I feel that perhaps the two of them have joined forces. Xianyun headed to the Cloud Ray City's Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion and took Administrator Wu Yuan's son, Wu Sun, as a student, so their relationship is rather close. If they joined forces, then it would be sufficient to be unafraid of the threat our Immortal Monarch's estate poses to them. But why did they act in this way? Could that kid that ascended from the mortal dimension was worthy for them to even offend our Immortal Monarch's estate to help him? Impossible. I don't know. You can leave. I'll report this matter to the Lord Immortal Monarch, whereas your assignment is to pay close attention to Xianyun's whereabouts and report it to out men at all times. You must investigate and find out everything about this matter before they leave the Eastern Peace Continent. Yes, Phoenix Nest City was the true hub of authority in the Eastern Peace Continent. At the same time, it was the place the Immortal Monarch's estate resided, and it was like the place the imperial government was in the mortal world. At this moment, within a courtyard house in Phoenix Nest City was a gray-clothed middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance who was sending away a young man, and then he turned around, closed the door, and left the house hastily. He was Qin Zhong, a commander of the Immortal Monarch's estate that had always helped the Immortal Monarch gather intel in secret. He didn't possess a great reputation, but he possessed an extremely important status. The intel he gathered today was too shocking, so Qin Zhong himself was unable to make a decision. Thus, he could only report it to Immortal Monarch Lin Hao and allow the Immortal Monarch to decide himself. The Immortal Monarch's estate was situated at the center of Phoenix Nest City. As the hub of authority that controlled an entire continent, the Immortal Monarch's estate was naturally built in an extremely grand and magnificent manner. It occupied an extremely large area of land with pavilions that stood towering within it, and it emanated a solemn aura. Merely the entrance to the estate was an entire 3 kilometers in height and was refined from bronze immortal gold that was refined 100 times. It was brilliant, grand, and revealed supreme magnificence like a true door that led to the heavens. When one stood beneath it, one was able to truly sense a feeling of being tiny like an ant. When Qin Zhong arrived before the entrance to the Immortal Monarch's estate, he unconsciously looked to the side. A young man and woman stood there. The young woman had beautiful hair that hung down like a waterfall, white skin, an appearance that was delicate and pretty, and a slim waist that could be held with a single arm. She naturally carried a moving and graceful charm. On the other hand, the man's figure was ramrod straight, his brows sharp like swords, and his clothes were whiter than snow. As he stood there with an icy cold gaze and a peerlessly handsome face that seemed as if it was carved, he emanated a firm and fierce aura. After these two people arrived at Phoenix Rest City 7 days ago, they would wait here every single day before dawn arrived, and they would return when the veil of night descended. Later on, Qin Zhong found out that they'd actually come to pay the Lord Immortal Monarch a visit. How could this be possible? Immortal Monarch Lin Hao was the ruler of a continent, so how could he be someone that anyone could just visit? Of course, Qin Zhong was also very clearly aware that Immortal Monarch Lin Hao was indeed not at the Immortal Monarch's estate recently, and he'd headed off somewhere else to pay a visit to an old friend. The Immortal Monarch had only just returned at noon today. But this didn't mean that the Lord Immortal Monarch would surely receive this pair of young man and woman. It was even to the extent that Qin Zhong suspected that even if this pair waited here every single day and revealed an extremely sincere attitude, it would be utterly impossible for the pair to get their wish. Because as explained before, this was the immortal monarch's estate and immortal monarch Lin Hao was the ruler of a continent. So all of this caused him to be bound to not be someone that anyone could meet. Qin Zhong shook his head and paid no further attention to the pair before he moved towards a small door at the side of the entrance. Comparatively speaking, the 3 kilometers tall door was truly too lofty and was densely covered in layer after layer of restrictions. It represented the dignity of the immortal monarch's estate, and it would normally not be opened unless an extremely important distinguished guest came to pay a visit or there was something of importance to announce. On the other hand, the small door was the only path for commander-level figures like Qin Zhong to go in and out of the estate. But right when Qin Zhong had just taken a step through the small door, he suddenly stopped moving while he revealed a slightly astounded expression because he heard an extremely inconceivable conversation. "Cousin brother, since we've come to get even with him, why we bothering about courtesy? How many days have passed now? That fellow obviously doesn't take us seriously and is intentionally avoiding us. Ling Long, even you're aware that courtesy before force has always been the way I do things, and it has been like this since I was young and is regardless of friend or foe. Killing is extremely simple, but only by killing in an open and upright manner would one live up to what one has learned. All right. Let me just ask you one thing. Do you intend to help me or not? I won't follow you back if we continue standing here like idiots. Could it be that you didn't hear that fellow has returned at noon today? That is going a bit too far. Never mind, since he's unwilling to meet us, then there's no need for it. Cousin brother, you've finally decided to make a move? Quickly, smash this door first. I can't bear the sight of it any longer." "As you wish." It was precisely because he heard this that Qin Zhong had stopped moving, and he finally came to a complete understanding. It turned out that the pair hadn't come to pay a visit to the immortal monarch, but had come to look for trouble. It was even to the extent that they intended to smash apart the entrance to the immortal monarch's estate now. How absurd. Could it be that the two of them have gone mad? Qin Zhong almost thought that he was hearing things. He immediately turned around and intended to berate this ignorant pair. Yet right when he turned his head around, his field of vision was filled with a strand of sword chi, and he was unable to see anything else. What sort of sword chi was this? It was like a blazing sun that rose from the horizon and tore through the darkness, causing light to illuminate the world, and it was resplendent because it was unparalleled. It was filled with an indescribably awe-inspiring, imposing aura that was open, upright, vast, and overshadowed the splendor of everything in the world. It seemed as if only this sword chi was left in the world. At this instant, Qin Zhong was horrified while every single pore on his body seemed as if it was about to explode. Bang! The sword chi descended, and the 3 kilometers tall door that was covered densely in layer upon layer of restrictions was smashed and collapsed with a bang. Violent airflow stretched out 500 kilometers into the surroundings, causing buildings to collapse, shatter, and transform into powder. When Qin Zhong recovered from his shock, his hair was disheveled, his countenance was pale, the clothes he wore had been completely shattered, and every single inch of skin on his body was covered in bloody marks, causing him to seem extremely miserable. But the shock in his heart caused him to practically forget the situation he was in because he saw the young man in snow-white clothes actually smash the door to the immortal monarch's estate with a single sword strike. How could this be possible? Qin Zhong was battered out of his senses. Who did this? How audacious! How dare you force your way into my immortal monarch's estate? You're simply looking for death. The immortal monarch's estate was filled with restlessness as furious roars sounded out from all directions. At the same time, numerous terrifying auras suddenly shot into the sky. This sword strike was for my cousin's sister. Since you, immortal monarch Lin Hao, are unwilling to meet me, then I, Mu Junlin, am unwilling to stay here for another moment. If you don't personally make a trip to the Midnight Continent's Mu clan to atone for your crimes in 3 days, then everything that we endured before this will be repaid hundredfold. A voice that was clear like the roar of a dragon shattered the layer of clouds in the sky and rumbled through the sky above the immortal monarch's estate. The voice was calm and indifferent, yet it revealed pride that was branded into the owner's bones. As soon as the voice finished resounding in the air, the originally restless immortal monarch's estate instantly fell into deathly silence. Mu Junlin, the Midnight Continent, the Mu clan. Every single one of these words represented an extremely terrifying fact, and because these facts were too shocking, it caused the entire immortal monarch's estate to fall into deathly silence. Mu Junlin, one of the 6 blazing suns of the immortal dimension. The Midnight Continent, one of the 4 great continents of the immortal dimension. As for the Mu clan, it was naturally the clan Mu Junlin was from, and since it was a power that could stand towering in one of the 4 great continents, the Midnight Continent, and foster one of the 6 blazing suns of the immortal dimension, how could it be compared to an ordinary power? Besides that, all of you actually dared to place a warrant on young Master Xianxia. If you still don't stop it, then I, Mu Linglong, will not let this matter end. Right amidst this deathly silence, a clear and melodious voice that carried extreme rage resounded in the sky, causing the deathly silent atmosphere to become even more silent, because her name similarly carried the surname Mu. This was a type of shapeless show of resources, reserves, and might. Exactly what has happened. Why? When everyone in the entire immortal monarch's estate recovered from their shock, they noticed the pair of young man and young woman had already vanished without a trace. I want an explanation now. After a short moment, a gloomy voice that carried a clanging tone rumbled through the ears of every single guard in the estate, causing all of them expressions to go pale once more. Because this was the voice of Immortal Monarch Lin Hao. Immortal Monarch's estate, Bright Glow Hall. The name of this hall implied a bright sun that hung in the sky and illuminated the world. Immortal Monarch Lin Hao, who wore a white robe and had hair that hung loosely on his shoulders, sat at the seat of the head. He didn't have the slightest expression on his face, and he remained completely silent. Only his eyes flowed with cold bolts of electricity as they opened and closed, and it was horrifying. The atmosphere in the hall was extremely oppressive and deathly silent. All the guards under the command of the Immortal Monarch and even 3 golden Immortal Realm experts that lived in seclusion had gathered here. All of them had gloomy expressions while feeling slightly uneasy and anxious. The scenes that occurred earlier were truly too astonishing. One of the 6 blazing suns that were extremely renowned in the immortal dimension now, Mu Junlin, had actually broken the entrance to the Immortal Monarch's estate with a single sword strike. That wasn't the end of it. Mu Junlin had actually said that he wanted Immortal Monarch Lin Hao to personally head to the Midnight Continent within 3 days to atone for his crimes. If any other Golden Immortal dared to speak in this way, then everyone would absolutely think that the Golden Immortal was a total idiot and was purely looking for death. But these words were spoken by Mu Junlin, so they had no choice but to attach great importance to it. He was one of the 6 great blazing suns of the immortal dimension and came from one of the 4 great continents, the Midnight Continent. Moreover, the terrifying and mysterious great power, the Mu clan, was standing behind him. Would anyone dare disregard the words spoken by such a figure with such background? Even Immortal Monarch Lin Hao didn't dare disregard it. And it was even to the extent that Immortal Monarch Lin Hao didn't make a move to stop Mu Junlin from leaving. In another way, this displayed that Immortal Monarch Lin Hao was fearful of Mu Junlin. Even if Mu Junlin was only a golden immortal, the dazzling halos that circled around Mu Junlin were sufficient to make even Immortal Monarch Lin Hao, who possessed a cultivation at the Saint Immortal realm, to not dare act rashly. In view of these reasons, Immortal Monarch Lin Hao had gathered all the higher-ups beneath his command for the sake of finding out exactly what had infuriated Mu Junlin to the point that this incident occurred. When a ruler that controlled a continent desired to obtain some information, it was truly too simple. In almost no time, a guard charged into the hall while sweating profusely, and then knelt down on the ground with a thump while trembling with fear before submitting the information he'd gathered. The information was extremely simple. It recorded in detail everything that had occurred in the Azure Soul mine, and it included the names of every single ascender. Shockingly, Xianxia and Mu Linglong's names were there as well. When he saw the words Mu Linglong, Immortal Monarch Lin Hao instantly understood everything. In the next instant, his expression turned icy cold and gloomy to the extreme. Since it was able to make a Saint Immortal furious to such an extent, it obviously showed the impact this piece of information had brought to Immortal Monarch Lin Hao. The atmosphere in the hall became even more oppressive, and it seemed as if it had frozen and caused everyone to feel suffocated. Everyone turned silent like cicadas in the winter and felt even more uneasy. All of you are really great. All of you actually made no distinction and blindly captured everyone. How impressive! Immortal Monarch Lin Hao spoke word by word as if it was squeezed out from the cracks between his teeth, and it was like sledgehammers that struck on the hearts of everyone, causing them to be shocked to the point their faces went pale while their bodies were completely drenched by cold sweat. The body of the guard that knelt on the floor went weak as he fell completely on the ground with a ghastly pale expression, and his entire body started trembling uncontrollably. How could the might of a saint immortal in a state of rage be something he could resist? Fortunately, Immortal Monarch Lin Hao withdrew his might and rage in the next moment because he was clearly aware that he couldn't be furious right now as he had to think of a method to deal with this. Otherwise, a group of old fellows might swarm over murderously from the Midnight Continent 3 days from now. Who was in charge of the Azure Soul Mine? Immortal Monarch Lin Hao's expression had become extremely indifferent and emotionless as he spoke. It was Commander Meng Xian. The guard on the ground spoke with a trembling voice. Order him to come see me before it turns dark today. Otherwise he doesn't have to return again. Immortal Monarch Lin Hao instructed coldly. Once he recovered his calm, he fully revealed the resolute and decisive methods of a ruler. Everyone sighed in their hearts when they heard this, as they were clearly aware that Commander Meng Xian would probably be made the scapegoat this time. My lord, what should we do about that Xianxia? Meanwhile, Qin Zhong couldn't help but asked with a low voice. Mu Linglong had left, yet she'd clearly expressed that if they dared to cause trouble for Xianxia, then she would take them to be enemies. Immortal Monarch Lin Hao's attitude towards this was extremely firm, and he answered without the slightest hesitation. Capture him. No matter what, he can't be allowed to escape Eastern Peace Continent. Everyone was stunned by this decision, and they were completely bewildered. They didn't understand why Immortal Monarch Lin Hao would persist to act in this way under such circumstances. The Mu clan is extraordinary indeed, but it doesn't mean that no one can go against them. Immortal Monarch Lin Hao seemed to have thought of something, causing his expression to carry a wisp of confidence. When they heard this, everyone faintly felt that Immortal Monarch Lin Hao had probably been asked by someone to capture Xianxia, and the identity of the person that pulled the strings behind the scenes obviously possessed the ability to go against the Mu clan. When they thought up to here, everyone felt shocked in their hearts. Since this person was capable of making the Immortal Monarch listen to his orders, could it be that the person pulling the strings from behind the scenes is a power from one of the 4 great continents? On the other hand, exactly what is the identity of that Xianxia to actually draw the hatred of such a colossus? The more they thought about it, the more shocked they were, and only now did they notice that the wanted ascender actually had an extremely great secret. All right, I'll be heading to the 4 great continents tomorrow to pay a visit to a friend. With his assistance, I ought to be able to easily deal with the problem with the Mu clan. As for the matter of capturing Xianxia, I'll leave it to all of you. Immortal Monarch Lin Hao pondered deeply for a long time before he decided. Everyone nodded in unison when they heard this. The level of this matter was too high, and perhaps it could only be resolved by the Lord Immortal Monarch. As for all of them, they were subordinates that were utterly unable to encounter figures of that level, so they were naturally didn't even have a chance to help. Amongst the people present, only Qin Zhong felt slightly hesitant, and he couldn't restrain himself in the end. My lord, I've just obtained the news that Xianxia might have joined forces with the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion and 4 Divinity Academy. Before he could finish speaking, Immortal Monarch Lin Hao's face sank while the flames of rage he just restrained had started to leap out once more. He couldn't restrain himself any longer and shouted in a grim voice. What did you say? Tell me clearly. Exactly what is going on? His voice was like a thunderclap that shook everyone present to the point their eardrums almost split open. At this moment, everyone present here felt slightly at a loss. No matter which one it was, the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion and 4 Divinity Academy weren't a power their Immortal Monarch's estate could compare to. Presently, Xianxia had actually joined forces with these 2 powers, so it was no wonder that Immortal Monarch Lin Hao would be so furious. Qin Zhong gulped down a mouthful of saliva with great difficulty before he spoke and explained everything he knew. What a truly troublesome little fellow. After he finished listening to all of this, Immortal Monarch Lin Hao couldn't help but grit his teeth and sigh with emotion. Everyone else deeply agreed. Who could have imagined that a young man who'd just ascended into the immortal dimension would actually cause so many disturbances in less than half a month of time? But the situation isn't so severe yet. Wu Yuan is only the administrator of the Goldwave Immortal Pavilion in Cloud Ray City, and he can't represent the attitude of the entire Goldwave Immortal Pavilion. Not to mention from the beginning until the end. There's no proof that there's any close relationship between him and Xianxia. Immortal Monarch Lin Hao took a deep breath and said slowly, "As for that teacher, Shen Yun, from the Four Divinity Academy, if he dares to protect that kid, then so long as it's within the Eastern Peace Continent, he can't do anything about it. Then, what should we do?" Qin Zhong asked in a low voice. "If you've clearly investigated that Xianxia is following by Shen Yun's side, then stop them and capture that kid before allowing Shen Yun to leave." Immortal Monarch Lin Hao instructed before he stood up and left the hall with large strides. Swoosh! Beneath the boundlessly high sky, a bronze-treasured carriage smashed through the waves of air as it flashed forward. Within the treasured carriage, Xianxia sat cross-legged while condensing the energy of the laws. Wu Sun was studying the Tao of talismans with a concentrated expression instead. On the other hand, Shen Yu was holding the newly repaired ancient talisman and inspecting it calmly. The atmosphere was extremely peaceful. But Xianxia was clearly aware that this peace was only temporary, and the forces under the command of the Immortal Monarch would absolutely not allow him to leave the Eastern Peace Continent like this. Not to mention their destination this time was Spirit Radiance City, and it was absolutely a place that was surrounded by massive forces since a long time ago. The reason was extremely simple. Long ago, while he was still in Cloud Ray City, Xianxia had already found out that only 2 cities within the entire Eastern Peace Continent possessed teleportation formations that were connected to other continents. One was the Phoenix Rest City, the lair of the Immortal Monarch's estate. The other was Spirit Radiance City. For the sake of capturing Xianxia or to prevent Xianxia from escaping Eastern Peace Continent, the forces of the Immortal Monarch's estate would absolutely not leave these critical places unguarded. In other words, the Spirit Radiance City was absolutely like the lair of a dragon to Xianxia, and it could be said to contain killing intent with every step he took. He had no choice but to go there, because if he wanted to leave Eastern Peace Continent, then he had to utilize the teleportation formation in Spirit Radiance City, as everyone in their group, including Shen Yun, wasn't a golden immortal, so they were naturally unable to move freely between continents. But the only thing that caused Xianxia to feel at ease was that according to Shen Yun, the experts of the Four Divinity Academy would converge with them when they arrived at Spirit Radiance City. With this assistance, it would be sufficient to guarantee that they would be able to leave Eastern Peace Continent safely. Of course, this was merely Shen Yun's guarantee. Xianxia didn't dare to place all hope onto Shen Yun, and based on the current circumstances, only the path of improving his own strength would cause him to feel much more at ease. Unknowingly, a day had passed. The bronze-treasured carriage was moving in the sky above a desolate plain, and it was evening, causing the boundless sky to be dim. Shen Yun, who was studying the ancient talisman, suddenly raised his head and withdrew a flickering jade-white pearl from his pocket before he said with a smile, "The assistance from our Four Divinity Academy has arrived." As he spoke, he'd stood up and stopped the bronze-treasured carriage. Xianxia and Wu Sun's spirits were refreshed when they heard this, and they stood up successively before following behind Shen Yun to arrive outside the treasured carriage. Swoosh! A piercingly cold silver radiance that was like starlight swiftly tore through the sky as it rushed over from extremely far in the distance, and it appeared in their fields of visions. When Xianxia saw the silver radiance emanated by the flying immortal treasure, he couldn't help but be stunned while a wisp of an astounded expression appeared on the corners of his mouth. The silver radiance was restrained to reveal a graceful and slender beautiful figure. A tight white shirt that was tied up at the waist, black slim-fit pants, bright and sharp high heels, and thick and slightly wavy golden hair that was coiled into a bun to reveal an icy cold and beautiful appearance. Her lips were red and moist, her skin smooth and fair, and her figure revealed a shocking sense of charm. Her slightly high nose even had a pair of black framed glasses above it, causing her entire person to emanate a strong aura of a queen that was intellectual, noble, and proud. This sort of dressing was absolutely unique in the world. This person was naturally Liang Bing. Never had Xianxia imagined that he would actually be reunited with her at this moment. Nor had he expected that the assistants from the Four Divinity Academy that Xianyun mentioned would be Liang Bing. It's truly a coincidence. Xianxia sighed endlessly with emotion in his heart. Actually, it wasn't just Xianxia who was surprised. Even Xianyun was slightly stunned when he saw that the person who'd come was Liang Bing, and he said with surprise, "Eldest young miss, why have you come?" Liang Bing swept Xianyun with her gaze before looking at Xianxia, and a wisp of an arc appeared on the corners of her red lips as she said, "It's naturally because of him." Him? Xianyun looked at Xianxia and still found it slightly difficult to understand. Xianxia faintly guessed something instead, and he immediately moved forward and stretched out his hand as he said, "I never expected that we would meet again here." He naturally stretched out his hand to shake hers. This was the etiquette that left the deepest impression to Xianxia when he met Liang Bing for the first time. Liang Bing was slightly stunned before she stretched her hand to shake Xianxia's hand, and then she said, "I rushed over as soon as I heard the news. Now it would seem like I wasn't too late." The two of them shaking hands caused Xianyun to instantly stare with his eyes wide open, and it seemed as if he'd seen some sort of terrifying scene that shouldn't occur. On the other hand, the nearby Wuxia was dumbstruck since a long time ago. Firstly, it was because Liang Bing was truly too beautiful, and her dressing and style that deeply embodied a queen was truly an impactful sight, caused his heart to shake and feel extremely dazed. Simply speaking, the scene before his eyes was too beautiful, and it caused him to not dare take another look. Secondly, he was just like Xianyun and had never expected that she seemed to be familiar with this extremely beautiful woman. Moreover, based on the situation, their relationship was really not bad. So eldest young miss knows young master Xianxia. No wonder, no wonder. Meanwhile, Xianyun had recovered from his shock and couldn't help but sigh with emotion while the gaze he shot at Xianxia had changed, and he had a deeper understanding towards how Xianxia was someone that concealed his ability. Wuxia deeply agreed with this sentiment. Liang Bing didn't give any explanation towards this, and she just asked Xianxia, "Why are you wanted by Immortal Monarch Lin Hao?" Xianxia immediately described everything he encountered after ascending into the immortal dimension. Liang Bing's beautiful brows raised as she said, "Someone definitely asked Immortal Monarch Lin how to do this." Xianxia shrugged. "Even though that's probably the case, I'm unable to find out exactly who did it for now." This was very difficult to guess indeed, because the power standing behind someone that was capable of making an immortal monarch do this was surely a colossus. According to Xianxia's analysis, there were at least two targets that were most suspicious. One was the Wuxia clan, and the other was the enemy power that annihilated the 9 Radiant Sword sect in the immortal dimension. But no matter which it was, they were forces that Xianxia wasn't able to go against for now. He could only leave the Eastern Peace Continent and head to Dao Emperor Academy to seek a chance to gain a foothold in the immortal dimension. Only in this way would he be able to make the situation he was in safer. Right at this moment, a wave of fluctuation arose in space before a thin and tall figure walked out from within, and his entire body was suffused with peerlessly fierce golden immortal laws. This was a young man with an extremely pale countenance and pitch-black pupils. He wore black clothes and carried a pitch-black blade on his back, and his aura was icy cold, indifferent, and murderous as if he didn't have any feelings. As soon as he made an appearance, he restrained his aura and stood silently by Liang Bing's side. But she didn't dare to disregard him at all because this tall and indifferent young man was absolutely an expert that had tempered himself through countless battles and slaughters. Moreover, he was an expert at the Golden Immortal Realm. "This is Liang Luo, an expert of the Blade Dao from my Liang clan." Liang Bing's introduction was extremely simple, yet when it entered into Wuxun's ears, it caused him to suddenly cry out involuntarily. "Liang Luo, isn't that the expert who was at the 87th rank on the Ascension Immortal rankings 10 years ago? After he advanced into the Golden Immortal Realm 5 years ago, He repeatedly challenged one of the 6 blazing suns, the Jade Phoenix Wan Jianxing. Even though he lost, yet it was still honorable, and he'd one of the most striking experts in the Blade Dao in the recent years. Xianxia was shocked in his heart as he never expected that this black-clothed, black-haired, and black-bladed young man would actually have such a legendary past. The Ascension Immortal rankings Wu soon spoke off wasn't the continental Ascension rankings, so those capable of being ranked in the top 10,000 of it were top experts in the immortal dimension. Liang Luo had actually been able to be ranked at the 87th position of the Ascension Immortal rankings 10 years ago, so it obviously showed how terrifying the natural talent and cultivation he possessed was. Moreover, as soon as he advanced into the Golden Immortal realm 5 years ago, he'd gone to challenge one of the 6 great blazing suns, the Jade Phoenix Wan Jianxing. This courage and resolution was similarly not something an ordinary person could possess. All of this caused Xianxia to have a deeper understanding of the rankings on the Ascension Immortal rankings. Presently, he was only ranked at the 137th position on the Eastern Peace Continent's Ascension rankings. Yet the entire immortal dimension had 4,900 continents. Such a ranking didn't even carry the qualifications to be ranked in the top 10,000 rankings of the Ascension Immortal rankings, let alone be ranked in the top 100. Liang Luo remained indifferent towards Wu Sun's involuntary cry of admiration and Xianxia's surprised gaze. And he stood indifferently by Liang Bing's side like a block of ice that would never melt. It seemed as if besides the blade on his back, there was nothing else in this world that could enter his heart. With the addition of Liang Bing and Liang Luo, Shen Yun's confidence in being able to bring Xianxia out of Eastern Peace Continent multiplied greatly. Subsequently, they didn't waste any more time and sat in Shen Yun's bronze treasured carriage before continuing on their way to Spirit Radiant City. An amusing fact was that Liang Bing and Liang Luo had just come from the teleportation formation in Spirit Radiant City, and they had a rough understanding of the situation in Spirit Radiant City. Just as Xianxia had expected, the situation in Spirit Radiant City was extremely tense, and guards from the Immortal Monarch's estate were everywhere. Especially the surroundings of the teleportation formation, there was even a golden immortal guarding it. Obviously, if Liang Bing and Liang Luo hadn't come to assist them this time, and if they relied solely on Shen Yun's might, then even if he utilized the name of the 4 Divinity Academy, the consequences would absolutely be unimaginable. On the way, Xianxia found out from the conversation between them that the 4 Divinity Academy situated in the Southbridge continent was actually built by the Liang, Luo, Gu, and Yin clan's founding ancestors, the Eastern Emperor Taizhen, the Dark Emperor Yuan Sun, the Phoenix Queen Yin Gu, and the demon forefather Luo Shang, and it had existed for countless years until now. But up until this day, the 4 Divinity Academy was still firmly controlled by the 4 ancient clans of Liang, Luo, Gu, and Yin. This was why Liang Bing would suddenly come over after Shen Yun sought assistance from the 4 Divinity Academy. You intend to head to the Dao Emperor Academy? Liang Bing couldn't help but be slightly stunned when she heard Xianxia's objective and said, "There's only a little over a year left before the time the Dao Emperor Academy starts its recruitment, whereas the lowest qualifications for recruitment is to be ranked in the top 1,000 of the Ascension Immortal rankings." Xianxia nodded and said, "I understand. Don't I have another year of time? I think I'll be able to make it." Liang Bing thought for a moment before she came to an understanding. She was clearly aware that Xianxia was an heir from Oracle Mountain. So since he dared speak in this way, he surely had extremely great confidence. "Then do you have any plans during this year?" asked Liang Bing. "Plans?" Xianxia was stunned, and then he shook his head. He only had a very simple thought of thinking to make the best use of his time to become stronger before charging into the Ascension Immortal rankings. As for anything else, he truly hadn't considered it. "I know of a good place to go," Liang Bing said, "but let's talk about it after we leave Eastern Peace Continent. I believe that, with your combat strength, you'll be able to quickly charge up the Ascension Immortal rankings there." Xianxia glanced at Liang Bing with surprise and didn't speak any further. One day later, Spirit Radiant City appeared far away within their fields of vision. This was an extremely ancient city. Its dark gray-colored walls were suffused with the marks of time, and it emanated a solemn and deep aura. "Let's go." After briefly sizing the city up, Xianxia, Shen Yun, and Wu Sun walked into Spirit Radiant City, while being accompanied by Liang Bing and Liang Luo. As soon as they entered the city, Xianxi's first feelings could be described with two words: cold and murderous. Even if it was the most bustling time in the morning, the wide streets that led towards all directions was completely cold and desolate. Besides a few pedestrians, only group after group of guards from the Immortal Monarch's estate could be seen patrolling the city. Even the air in the heavens and the earth seemed to have become heavy, and it carried an oppressive feeling that a storm was approaching. Stop! Hand over your immortal tokens. My Immortal Monarch's estate is trying to apprehend a villain. I hope that everyone can cooperate. A group of guards charged over menacingly and surrounded Xianxi's group. Let's go. Liang Bing didn't even spare these guards a glance before she instructed Xianxi, and then she withdrew the cosmic-grade immortal artifact, Silverlight Shuttle. It transformed into an expanse of piercingly cold starlight that enveloped Xianxi, Xianyun, and Wuxia within it before charging ahead with a swish. How audacious! You're courting death. Attack! Don't let them escape. All the guards were stunned before they roared furiously, and they charged over with the intention of stopping Liang Bing. Swoosh! Right at this moment, a pitch-black blade light appeared abruptly. It was clean as if it wasn't tainted with a speck of dust, and it was translucent and flawless as it flashed momentarily. Pooh! 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 A wave of muffled sounds resounded as numerous bloody heads flew up into the sky. Due to their forward momentum, the headless bodies were still dashing violently towards Liang Bing while blood sprayed from their severed necks, and it was an extremely frightening scene. All of this was because the wisp of blade light was too swift, too sharp, and too merciless. Presently, Spirit Radiance City was in the control of the Immortal Monarch's estate's guards, and it was fully guarded by their elite forces. The commotion here arose swiftly and ended swiftly as well, yet it still drew their attention. So it wasn't long before the entire Spirit Radiance City seemed as if it had awoken from its deathly silence, and a wave of clamorous and furious howls resounded from all directions. An enemy assault! An enemy assault! They're heading for the teleportation formation. Quickly! Quickly rush over and notify the Lord Golden Immortal. For a time, various voices surged through the sky above this ancient city, and it completely lit up the atmosphere of conflict in the air. Swoosh! 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 Numerous blazing streaks tore through the sky above Spirit Radiance City, and they converged from all directions towards the southwest area of the city. When looked at from afar, it was at least over 1,000 streaks that formed a dense mass like locusts, and actually more than half of them were existences at the mysterious immortal realm. Their powerful, imposing auras wove together, and it caused the heavens and the earth to be overshadowed. The southwest area of the city was where the teleportation formation was located, and it was guarded by a large number of forces from the Immortal Monarch's estate a long time ago. Moreover, along with the occurrence of this chaos in the city, the surroundings of the teleportation formation as devoid of any other cultivators and was completely controlled by the guards from the Immortal Monarch's estate. If one looked down from the sky, one would be able to see that there were two streaks flying at extreme speeds from the east of Spirit Radiance City to the southwest at this moment. One streak emanated a piercingly cold silver radiance, and it was emanated by Liang Bing's cosmic-grade immortal artifact, the Silverlight Shuttle. The second streak was pitch black and murderous like a strand of the glow of night that flowed out from the eternal night, and it opened up the path ahead. It was Liang Luo, a black-clothed, black-haired, and black-bladed golden immortal. Kill! Get them! Bastards! Die! Everywhere they passed, group after group of guards from the Immortal Monarch's estate assaulted them from both sides, and they attacked Liang Luo with their strongest might and most ferocious imposing aura. But before Liang Luo's plain and pitch-black blade, all of this was like papers that were easily torn apart, crushed, and destroyed. He swept through all obstacles before him and left behind expanse after expanse of scarlet-red rains of blood. This was the strength of a golden immortal. When facing the attacks of these mysterious immortals and heavenly immortals, it was entirely a bearing of absolute destruction, and it could be described as all-powerful. This path wasn't peaceful, but Xianxi moved through it in a calm manner. He had Liang Bing's cosmic-grade immortal artifact to carry him and the golden immortal Liang Lu to open up the path ahead, and he was frequently able to see heads being severed, corpses being shattered, and blood spraying into the sky, shrill and miserable cries, furious howls filled with unwillingness, and terrified shouts resounded without end. This path was like a path in purgatory, and Xianxia was untainted by blood. He even had the free time to observe Liang Luo's battle style. With his understanding and knowledge of battle, he had no choice but to admit that Liang Luo's grasp of the Tao of Blades had already attained the state of destroying a myriad of techniques with a single blade strike. Coupled with his cultivation at the golden immortal realm and the golden immortal laws Liang Luo had grasped, the might Liang Luo displayed was sufficient to easily destroy the restraints of the spatial laws in the immortal dimension, slash apart space, and draw upon the might of the heavens and the earth. The blade was the Tao. The Tao was the blade. The Tao and blade were one, and they could destroy everything. This was Liang Luo, who'd been ranked at the 87th on the Ascension Immortal rankings 10 years ago, advanced into the Golden Immortal realm 5 years ago, and had challenged one of the 6 Blazing Suns, the Jade Phoenix Wan Jianxing, numerous times in the past. A tall and indifferent young man who wore black clothes and possessed black hair and a black blade. Such a figure's reputation in the immortal dimension was surely like a scorching sun in the midday sky and was admired by a myriad of living beings. Yet he'd actually coincidentally become Xianxia's vanguard at this moment. When he thought up to here, an indescribable feeling couldn't help but arise in his heart. And Xianxia suddenly understood why those great powers would exhaust great effort to employ and foster some experts as their subordinates. There was always a greater sense of accomplishment in instructing one's subordinate to carry out some things than doing it by oneself. That sort of feeling was probably called the might of authority. But in next to no time, Xianxia discarded these feelings in his heart and recovered tranquility of the heart. Because Liang Luo wasn't his subordinate, and he was only in existence at the initial stage of the heavenly immortal realm, so he couldn't be considered to possess any authority. Everything that was occurring before his eyes was proving how formidable Liang Luo's strength was, and he was only someone that received the benefits of it. Once I gain a foothold in the immortal dimension, I'll build a power of my own as well. Not for the sake of possessing authority, but merely for the sake of being similarly able to assist more friends and family in the future. Xianxia decided in his heart. Sometimes, the decision made while being moved inadvertently might create boundless effects. Just like Xianxia didn't know what sort of effect the decision he made today would have on the future situation of the 3 dimensions. All of this was something obtained on the path towards the Tao. It was absolutely impossible to understand unless one personally experienced it. When Xianxia returned to his senses, the clamorous sounds of furious roars that rose and fell in the sky above Spirit Radiance City had gradually fallen to deathly silence, and it had recovered the cold atmosphere it had before. However, compared to before, the air was suffused with a strand of dense smell of blood. This was the southwest area of Spirit Radiance City. Under Liang Luo's lead, they'd left behind a bloody path that was piled up with corpses and finally arrived here. The teleportation that could traverse the distance between continents was just 3 kilometers ahead, and this sort of teleportation formations had existed long ago before the Immortal Court was even established. At this moment, the surroundings of the teleportation formation were covered by a large number of troops. Layer after layer of commander-level mysterious immortal realm figures from the Immortal Monarch's estate had tightly surrounded this place to the point even a drop of water couldn't get past, and there were at least a few hundreds of them. In other words, this meant that there were a few hundreds of mysterious immortal realm experts garrisoned here. This was absolutely a terrifying force, and in the entire Eastern Peace Continent, only the Immortal Monarch's estate possessed such resolution and resources. Most striking of them all was a black-bearded and white-haired middle-aged man at the center. He wore a green robe, had fair and clear skin, and stood with his hands behind his back while naturally emanating an aura of matchlessness. He seemed like a crane standing among chicken, and he was extremely extraordinary, because he was a golden immortal. When he saw this tight arrangement and powerful forces, Xianxia's brows couldn't help but raise while a wisp of icy coldness arose in his heart. He finally understood how much effort the Immortal Monarch's estate had put in for the sake of apprehending him. and it seemed as if it wouldn't allow him to escape no matter what. They really do think highly of me. At this moment, the hatred in Xianxi's heart was indescribable. He knew very well that if it wasn't for Liang Bing and Liang Luo, he would absolutely be unable to escape this calamity. I'll remember this. Xianxi took a deep breath and exerted great effort to restrain the rage in his heart. So there's a golden immortal amongst you. No wonder you were able to kill your way here. Unfortunately, no matter who all of you are, you must stop here. The green-clothed middle-aged man raised his head while his gaze shot out like a bolt of lightning and swept Xianxi and the others before it finally descended onto Liang Luo. And then his gaze constricted slightly before it recovered its calm. Cut through them. Liang Bing didn't waste her breath at all, and her red lips parted lightly before she spat out 3 murderous words. Compared to Liang Bing's 3 words, the indifferent and tall Liang Luo didn't speak a single word, and he'd entered into battle as soon as Liang Bing finished speaking. A blade soared through the sky like a wisp of the pitch-black veil of night suddenly descending into the world as it slashed down. This blade strike was completely different when compared to before. The pitch-black blade light was filled with peerlessly fierce golden immortal laws, and it was extremely shocking as it crushed and shattered space inch by inch and caused circle after circle of spatial ripples to be emanated from the shattered space. This was the immortal dimension, and the laws of the heavens and the earth were extremely solid. However, this blade strike had shattered space and thrown yin and yang into disorder. This was the true might of a golden immortal. Bang! The battle erupted. Liang Luo's astonishing blade strike that was like the descent of eternal night killed a few tens of mysterious immortal realm experts before it was blocked by the green-robed middle-aged man in the end. After that, the 2 golden immortals entered into a fierce battle, and it caused the entire scene to fall into chaos. The green-robed middle-aged man utilized a pair of short swords. One was completely red like fire and the other was crystalline like snow. The sword lights emanated from it just happened to seem like a fire and icy dragon soaring into the sky, and they were imposing, swift, fierce, and powerful. It actually completely blocked off all of Liang Luo's attacks, and it revealed the middle-aged man's extremely deep cultivation and ability. But Liang Luo remained indifferent towards all of this. Once he entered into battle, he became even more indifferent and icy cold, and there were only enemies and battle within his eyes. For a time, this entire expanse of the heavens and the earth was drowned by blazing light, and it was like 2 live volcanoes were colliding. The terrifying fluctuations that erupted from these collisions crushed and collapsed all the buildings in an area of 5,000 kilometers, and it transformed to earth into an expanse of ruins. If it was at a normal time, a battle of this level would be sufficient to draw over countless people to watch it. Unfortunately, this wasn't an arena battle, and it was a true battle and slaughter where life and death was decided in a moment. Not to mention watching, even approaching slightly closer might cause one to be affected and perish on the spot. Let's go! Liang Bing didn't even spare a glance to Liang Luo's battle, and she directly led Xianxi, Wu Sun, and Xianyun to charge towards the teleportation formation that was ahead. It was even to the extent that she actually didn't even spare a glance at the mysterious immortal realm experts that swarmed towards them all along the way, let alone have any intention to make a move against them. She simply seemed as if she was throwing herself against the tip of a blade. This terrified everyone to the point that even Xianyun's face turned pale, and he almost cried out. But these worries of his were obviously unnecessary. Everywhere Liang Bing passed, the enemies wouldn't have even approached her before they would be killed by a pitch-black strand of blade chi, and they were utterly unable to injure her in the slightest. She couldn't refrain himself from turning around to look over when he saw this. He saw Liang Luo was frequently slashing out blade strikes in midair to help open up a path ahead for Liang Bing, and he was simultaneously fighting the green-robed middle-aged man while he did this. However, doing this caused the situation he was in to become dangerous. His body was frequently injured by the sword chi emanated by the middle-aged man, and his entire body was bloody and covered with scars, causing him to see extremely frightening. But even then, his expression still remained indifferent, calm, and murderous. Moreover, his brows didn't even twitch, causing him to simply seem as if he didn't have any feelings. Come on! Liang Bing's low shout sounded out by Xianxi's ears, and only now did he notice that they'd already arrived at the center of the teleportation formation. What about him? Xianxi couldn't refrain himself from asking. He has always been this sort of person. Once he enters into battle, he fights with his life on the line. If it wasn't for this, it would be impossible for him to attain his current accomplishments. Liang Bing sighed with emotion and said swiftly, "Don't worry, he won't die so easily. Otherwise, that Jade Phoenix Wan Jiansheng would have killed him countless times." As soon as she finished speaking, she'd activated the teleportation formation. OM! A rumble resounded. In the next moment, Xianxi felt a bright light flash before his eyes. Then his entire body felt as if it was dragged into a strange and calm temporal flow and moved through it swiftly, and his vision went black. After an unknown period of time, when Xianxi's field of vision became clear once more, he noticed that he'd arrived at an entirely unfamiliar place. Streams of people weaved through the streets that were bustling and clamorous, and numerous pavilions and houses were arranged in rows that wound along and stretched towards all directions. It was like he was in an expanse of extremely prosperous streets. This is the Southbridge continent's 4 divinity city. Liang Bing's relaxed voice that carried a sense of relief resounded by his ears, causing Xianxi to be instantly stunned. Just a moment earlier, it was an expanse of danger where every step was filled with killing intent. Just a moment later, it had transformed into a bustling and clamorous street that flowed with streams of people and carriages. This sort of huge contrast caused Xianxi to be unable to avoid being dazed. But right after that, he suddenly started laughing as he felt the enormous rock that crushed down upon his heart had been removed, allowing his entire body to feel relaxed. His expression caused the nearby passing people to look at him with a strange expression, and they seemed as if they were looking at an idiot. Only Liang Bing faintly understood. Perhaps this moment was the most relaxed moment for Xianxi since he'd entered into the immortal dimension, and his nerves didn't have to be strained at all moments as he didn't have to worry about being pursued or being wanted. It was even to the extent that Liang Bing slightly didn't dare imagine how Xianxi, who'd just ascended into the immortal dimension for less than a month and was merely around the initial stage of the heavenly immortal realm, was able to persist amidst a dangerous situation where his enemies were just waiting for an opportunity to capture him. "Let's go take a nice rest at my estate." Liang Bing spoke with a voice that carried a trace of concern. Xianxi nodded. All right. Once he relaxed, then even with his formidable cultivation in the Tao heart, he felt a wave of exhaustion, so resting for a while naturally couldn't be any better. Shen Yun very sensibly bid his farewells and left with Wu Sun when he saw this. Before he left, he told Xianxi repeatedly that Xianxi must come see him in 4 Divinity Academy so that they could have an exchange in the Tao of Talismans. Xianxi naturally smiled and agreed to this sort of warm and sincere invitation. Shen Yun nodded with satisfaction when he obtained Xianxi's agreement. "Big brother Xianxi, my father asked me to hand this over to you. Please accept it." Similarly, at the time before they left, Wu Sun handed over a palm-size and crystalline command token to Xianxi. This was the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion's Gold Wave token, and it represented the identity of a distinguished guest. One that held this token would be able to enjoy extremely great benefits when spending in any Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion in the Immortal Dimension. For example, even Wu Yuan only possessed a few of these command tokens, and its value was absolutely not something that could be measured in immortal stones. In other words, it was impossible to purchase one with immortal stones. Simply speaking, unless it was one with a respected identity and status or a distinguished guest acknowledged by the Gold Wave Immortal Pavilion, it was utterly impossible to possess this command token. This obviously displayed how highly Wu Yuan thought of Xianxi, and for the sake of creating some goodwill between his son and Xianxi, he'd exhausted a great deal of effort. Southbridge Continent. In terms of scale and territory, it was much vaster and more prosperous than Eastern Peace Continent, and this could be discerned from the amount of Saint Immortal Realm experts possessed by the 2 continents. For example, Immortal Monarch Lin Hao was the only Saint Immortal Realm existence in Eastern Peace Continent. On the other hand, there was no less than 10 Saint Immortals in Southbridge Continent. Of course, these were only the known Saint Immortal Realm experts, and those formidable existences that lived in seclusion weren't included amongst them. But this was sufficient to display the disparity between the Southbridge continent and Eastern Peace continent. Southbridge continent possessed 9,900 cities, and for Divinity City couldn't be said to be the largest amongst them, yet it was fully deserving of the title of most famous. Because within this city was the renowned 4 Divinity Academy and 4 ancient clans of the Tao of Talismans, the Liang, Luo, Gu, and Yin clans, that had existed for countless years. This was the flourishing and prosperous central area of the Southbridge continent where sects stood like trees in a forest. Even though it was merely a city, it was much vaster than a small world in the mortal dimension. The Liang clan estate. Within a courtyard was a pavilion with a small bridge that had a stream of water flowing beneath it. It was filled with beautiful and exotic flowers, thick trees and tall bamboos, fluttering red-crowned cranes, and spirit monkeys that leaped about. The scenery was picturesque, and it seemed like an immortal paradise. This was the resting place Liang Bing had arranged for Chun Shi. There was a gold radiance immortal vein beneath the courtyard, so cultivating here was much better than cultivating in an ordinary paradise of cultivation. This allowed Chun Shi to understand exactly how deep the strength and reserves of the Liang clan was within the 4 Divinity City. Merely a courtyard used to entertain guests was built atop an immortal vein, and this wasn't something an ordinary power was able to accomplish. Night. Chun Shi woke up from his deep sleep. Since he'd arrived at this courtyard, he'd fallen into deep sleep almost immediately. When he woke up at this moment, he felt his entire body was comfortable, calm, relaxed, and his spirits were refreshed. This sort of situation felt like going to a quiet and otherworldly place to recuperate. Safety probably shouldn't be a problem in Southbridge continent. Next, I have to start cultivating in meditation. I must enter Tao Emperor Academy within a year. Chun Shi took a deep breath and started to contemplate his future path. Knock, knock, knock. After a short moment, he heard his room door being knocked. Young Master Chun Shi, are you in? Teng Lan has come to pay a visit. Senior Teng Lan? Chun Shi awoke from his contemplation and stood up with surprise before opening the door. Sure enough, he saw Teng Lan, who wore plain clothes and had a warm expression, was smiling at him from outside the door. Behind Teng Lan was a group of beautiful maidservants with elegant bearings, and some of them held basins of water while some held various clothes as they stood respectfully and reverently at the side. Young Master Chun Shi, please don't call me senior anymore. Such a method of address is too much for me. Teng Lan laughed heartily as he looked at the handsome young man before him, and he couldn't help but reveal a wisp of emotion in his eyes. How many years have passed? He has already arrived at the immortal dimension and attained the heavenly immortal realm. Sure enough, he fully deserves to be an heir of the Oracle Mountain that ascended the peak of the Grand Deduction Tower. In the 4,900 continents in the immortal dimension, such natural talent is absolutely at the top. Alright, then I'll call you Uncle Lan as well. Don't call me young master as well. Just use my name directly. Chun Shi smiled. Teng Lan had helped him a great deal in the talisman dimension, so now that they were reunited, he was rather delighted in his heart as well. Alright, I'll do as you say. Even though Teng Lan agreed, his attitude towards Chun Shi had become even more respectful. This caused the nearby maidservants to be extremely surprised in their hearts. Even though they were maidservants, all of them had cultivations at the heavenly immortal realm, so how could they be unable to discern that this young Master Chun Shi was only at the heavenly immortal realm in cultivation? But Manager Teng Lan was actually so respectful towards such a young man, so they couldn't help but be surprised. After all, even those young men that were ranked on the continent Xianxia rankings had never been taken seriously by Teng Lan. Who's this young man? Could it be that he's the son of a noble from the 4 great continents? All the maidservants couldn't help but be curious. Teng Lan noticed this scene yet didn't give any explanation, and he just instructed indifferently. What are all of you standing there for? Quickly help young Master Chun Shi clean up and get dressed. All of you can't bear the responsibility if you delay his participation of the eldest young Mrs. Banquet. The maidservants felt apprehensive in their hearts and hurriedly entered in succession. Some of them helped Chun Shi wipe his face, some helped him comb his hair, while some even helped him change his clothes, and they chattered together pleasantly while being extremely attentive and satisfactory in their service. Xianxia was really unable to take this because he'd never enjoyed people attending to him so closely in his life. He was just about to refuse, yet he saw Tenglan roar with laughter while closing the door. At this moment, Xianxia didn't even have the chance to refuse, and his figure instantly froze on the spot, while he didn't even know where to place his hands. All the maidservants covered their mouths and giggled without end when they saw this. Tenglan's eyes couldn't help but light up when Xianxia walked out of the room. He wore light green embroidered clothes while his jet black and dense hair was bound behind his head to reveal a handsome and firm face, and his eyes were deep like two dazzling stars. Coupled with his handsome and tall figure, and his calm and extraordinary bearing, he naturally emanated a noble and lofty aura. Not bad, not bad. Tenglan nodded as he praised without end. Uncle Lan, why exactly am I dressed in this way? Asked Xianxia. It's naturally for the sake of participating in the banquet the eldest young miss is holding. Tenglan said with a smile. Come, many young geniuses and famous beauties from 4 Divinity City will be coming tonight. The eldest young miss especially instructed me to bring you over. Xianxia's brows knit together because he disliked this sort of occasion. Many experts that are ranked in the Ascension Immortal rankings will be arriving for the banquet tonight. The eldest young miss wants you to broaden your horizons. Anyhow, there's no harm in going. Tenglan seemed to have seen through Xianxia's thoughts and explained in a low voice. Xianxia pondered deeply for a moment before he nodded and said, Then let's go. The veil of night was deep while the bright moon hung high above in the sky. The central hall of the Liang clan was brightly illuminated by lanterns while melodious music resounded in the ear, and it was filled with the sound of conversation and laughter. When Xianxia arrived under Tenglan's lead, the hall was already filled with guests and was extremely bustling. Unlike the banquets Xianxia had seen in the past, the situation in the hall seemed to be extremely free and relaxed. Row after row of tables were covered in white-colored tablecloths, while a variety of immortal wine, fruits, and various tasty refreshments were set out on the table. The guests moved about the various areas of the hall, and they were either chatting idly in groups of 2 or 3 or sipping tea in a corner by themselves. The sound of a divine tune drifted out from the side of the hall while dancers danced lightly to the tune, and it drew a great deal of cheering. This is a type of banquet that comes from the origin dimension, and it's one of the methods of holding a banquet that the eldest young miss loves the most. Moreover, the young people of 4 Divinity City are rather fond of it. Tenglan smiled as he explained from the side. Xianxia thought about Liang Bing's unusual style of dressing and instantly came to an understanding. But when he entered the hall, Xianxia was stunned by the scene before his eyes. Waves of sharp cries from women resounded throughout the hall, and it was on the verge of overturning the room. These people of the immortal dimension really reveal their true sentiments. Xianxia sighed with emotion in his heart. At this moment, the hall was filled with layer after layer of guests. The men were handsome and the women pretty, and all of them wore gorgeous clothes. Presently, all of them had excited expressions while the men cheered loudly and the women flushed red, and their entire bodies were trembling while they let out sharp cries. Xianxia couldn't help but look over at the source of this commotion. At the center of the hall was an enormous combat arena. At this moment, a battle was being carried out on the arena. One party to the battle was a young man who wore blue clothes, had a rectangular face, and possessed dense brows and large eyes. His gaze was bright and brilliant as he looked around. On the other side was a robust man that had golden hair, blue eyes, a dense and curly beard, and was an entire 6 m tall. He held a bronze spear in his hand and a round bronze shield. Regardless of appearance or weapon, they were both unusual and rather strange. The blue-clothed young man obviously had the upper hand, and he easily dealt with all of his opponent's attacks, causing the robust man to be angered to the point of revealing a savage expression while howling furiously without end. Moreover, the robust man was letting out a string of strange curses. The guests were cheering for the blue-clothed young man. This sort of battle couldn't be considered to be interesting and was even slightly boring to Xianxia. The only thing that drew Xianxia's attention was the gold-haired and blue-eyed robust man. If he wasn't wrong, then the robust man ought to be marquee rank expert from the xenorace, and he was an existence equivalent to the heavenly immortal realm. If this was the mortal dimension, then a xenorace expert like this was naturally an existence capable of commanding the winds and the clouds and would cause others to turn pale just from the mention of him. But in the immortal dimension where heavenly immortals were as numerous as the dogs on the street and mysterious immortals filled the streets, he was truly nothing. Of course, the blue-clothed young man on the combat arena was rather striking. According to Xianxia's estimation, the young man's cultivation was surely at the mysterious immortal realm, and it was slightly superior to Xiongming. Coupled with his handsome appearance and elegant and unrestrained bearing, it was no wonder that he made all the women present go so mad. Such a peerlessly handsome and valiant young man was extremely lethal to a woman indeed. That's a being captured from the Outer Realm's divine light world, and it's called a Knight of the Round Table. It possesses a rather lofty status in divine light world, and it has always been threatening to kill its way into the three dimensions. Truly laughable. The nearby Tung Lan laughed lightly and didn't conceal his disdain in the slightest. Not to mention a Knight of the Round Table, even a divine knight or divine angel were only clowns to the great figures of the immortal dimension. They're just a bunch of laughingstocks. Xianxia was aware that it wasn't just Tung Lan but all the living beings in the immortal dimension felt that the xenorace were stupid barbarians. So he wasn't surprised by this. Meanwhile, an unexpected event suddenly occurred on the combat arena. The robust man from the Outer Realm's divine light world roared furiously, and then he held the bronze spear in his hand as he disregarded everything and pierced it towards the young man. OM! The bronze spear glowed with peerlessly fierce might, and he revealed bold courage to take down the young man along with him, causing all the women present here to be unable to refrain from crying out in sharp voices. Boring. The young man shook his head and sighed lightly before he pointed out lightly with his white hand, and he hit the tip of the robust man's spear with an extraordinarily elegant move. Bang! An enormous bang resounded as the bronze spear shattered inch by inch, and the gold-haired and blue-eyed robust man even seemed as if he'd suffered the strike of a sledgehammer. His entire body was suddenly blasted out of the arena while he coughed up blood repeatedly, and then he fell to the ground with a thump. He struggled with the intention of standing up, yet his body was shackled by a group of guards that came out of nowhere before being led away. A barbarian is only a barbarian in the end, and he can't even withstand a single blow. The blue-clothed young man patted his hands and laughed light-heartedly without end. The women in the surroundings let out deafening sharp cries when they saw this, and all of them flushed red while the gazes they shot at the young man revealed burning adoration. That fellow is right. These sort of battles are rather boring. I wonder what those women are excited about. Xianxia frowned and slightly disliked this sort of clamorous environment because a mysterious immortal realm expert bullying a xenorace marquee rank expert that was comparable to a heavenly immortal was simply like an adult playing with a child, and it was too boring. These men and women are the descendants from the various great powers in Four Divinity City, and there's no lack of those with extraordinary natural talent. But most of them are spoiled profligate young masters and willful young misses. Since they haven't experienced slaughter, they naturally feel these sort of battles are exciting. Tung Lan smiled as he explained from the side. Xianxia came to a sudden understanding. But you must not underestimate Wu Yifan. Tung Lan shot his gaze towards the blue-clothed young man on the combat arena, and his expression was slightly cold while his smile remained on his face as he said, "This young genius is a guest invited by a branch family member of the Liang clan. He's from one of the four great continents, the Ice Sky continent, and he'd a rather renowned young talisman master there. Supposedly, he possesses the attainments of a talisman formation grandmaster, and he might advance to become a supreme talisman formation grandmaster in the future. So his future is limitless." As he spoke, Tung Lan's words carried no lack of praise, yet his tone revealed a strand of coldness. Xianxia pondered briefly and instantly came to an understanding. Since this person was invited over by a branch family member of the Liang clan, then he naturally represented a different group within the Liang clan. Any clan or power wouldn't allow a branch to strengthen itself and threaten the status of its direct descendants. So this branch family member of the Liang clan inviting Wu Yifan naturally carried an unusual meaning. When he thought up to here, She couldn't help but look towards the distance. Over there, Liang Bing sat elegantly on a soft chair while smiling faintly, and she revealed a graceful bearing. But if one observed her carefully, one would notice that her gaze that inadvertently swept towards Wu Yifan was filled with coldness and indifference. She noticed all of this very clearly, and he couldn't help but laugh in his heart. If you knew this was going to happen, then why hold such a banquet? Meanwhile, Wu Yifan, who stood on the combat arena, suddenly made a downward pressing motion with both his hands, causing the sharp cries in the hall to instantly quieten down. This unexpected event caused some of the guests in the distance to be unable to refrain from looking over. Wu Yifan couldn't help but reveal a wisp of a charming grin on the corners of his mouth when he saw this, and then he cleared his throat before he said in a clear and loud voice, "Fellow friends, I traveled a great distance from Ice Sky City because I admire the reputation of the Liang, Luo, Gu, and Yin clans that are renowned in the Tao of Talismans. Moreover, I feel extremely honored to be able to have the honor to participate in young Miss Liang Bing's banquet." When he spoke up to hear, he paused for a moment and swept the surroundings with his gaze before his gaze descended onto Liang Bing, and then he grinned as he cupped his hands before he continued. "For the sake of displaying my respect, why don't we seize this opportunity to carry out an exchange in talisman crafting?" An exchange? As soon as these words were spoken, all the guests revealed expressions of interest, and someone couldn't refrain from asking, "Young Master Wu, may I ask how the exchange will be done?" Wu Yifan laughed heartily when he heard this and said, "It's very simple. If the fellow Taoists from the Liang clan present here today are able to utilize the same talisman brush, ink, and immortal materials to craft a talisman and surpass me in speed and quality, then not only would I, Wu Yifan, willingly acknowledge my defeat, I'll even give up a high-rank dark spirit grade immortal artifact." He flipped his palm as he spoke, causing a light blue immortal sword that was deep and cold like water and was like an imposing ice dragon to appear, and it was suffused with a strand of shocking cold and sharp aura that froze the nearby air into balls of icy mist. The blue immortal sword was oppressively cold, illusory, and mysterious, and it was a rare treasure indeed. There was no lack of people with discerning gazes amongst those present here, and they recognized with a single glance that this was indeed a rare high-rank dark spirit grade immortal artifact, so they couldn't help but exclaim endlessly with admiration. This fellow has obviously come to look for trouble, yet he intentionally spoke in such a respectable and honorable manner. He really is a hypocrite. She shook his head without end instead. Sure enough, in the next moment, Wu Yifan shot his gaze towards the distant Liang Bing, while a charming smile curved up on the corners of his mouth. "I wonder what young Miss Liang Bing thinks?" As soon as these words were spoken, all the guests present here came to an understanding as well. Wu Yifan's actions obviously displayed that he intended to compete with the Liang clan in the Tao of Talismans. For a time, everyone was extremely excited as they shot their gazes towards the female host of the banquet in unison, and their gazes faintly carried a sense of anticipation. Most of them were from the various powers in Four Divinity City. At this moment, when they saw a rather renowned young genius from Ice Sky Continent actually intended to compete with the Liang clan in the Tao of Talismans, they naturally looked forward eagerly to this show. Liang Bing stood up slowly and stayed silent for a short moment before a wisp of an elegant grin couldn't help but suffuse the corners of her mouth, and then she said, "Since young Master Wu is so interested, then having an exchange is fine as well." As soon as she finished speaking, a few young men of the Liang clan walked out and requested to be allowed to compete with Wu Yifan. Liang Bing smiled and indicated that they should calm down before she shot her gaze at Wu Yifan and said, "Please go ahead. Haha, young Miss Liang Bing really deserves to be the successor of the Liang clan. Even if we disregard your cultivation in the Tao of Talismans, merely this bearing arouses extreme admiration in me." Wu Yifan laughed heartily before moving towards the center of the arena. At this moment, there was naturally a servant that placed a table before him, and the servant had prepared a talisman brush, ink, and various immortal materials according to Wu Yifan's request. Since it's an exchange with the fellow Taoists of the Liang clan, it naturally can't be an exchange with a talisman that's too ordinary. Why don't we craft one of the 7 forbidden talismans that's publicly acknowledged by those who study the Tao of Talisman, the Dance of Stars? As he spoke, Wu Yifan grinned lightly before he sat in front of the table. In an instant, his handsome face had become calm and concentrated, and then he stretched out his hand to pick up a black piece of jade, while he held the talisman brush lightly in his right hand. Without any hesitation, he started to dip the brush in ink before swinging it with smooth and graceful movements that were filled with a marvelous rhythm, and he seemed relaxed and unrestrained. His speed seemed to be slow, yet was actually swift to the extreme, and it created what seemed like a scene of overlapping images that caused others to be dazzled. When the women present here saw this scene, most of them exclaimed with admiration, while the skin on some of their bodies even turned rose red, and their appearances were so stirring that it was irresistible to the men in the surroundings. However, needless to say, a talisman formation master did indeed possess indescribable charm when crafting a talisman, and in the opinion of others, talisman formation masters themselves represented status and wealth that aroused reverence in others. Because regardless of pill refinement, equipment refinement, or perhaps puppet refinement and the raising of immortal beasts, practically everything couldn't escape the shadow of talisman formation masters. For example, the cauldrons required to refine pills, the formations inscribed on magic treasures, the mechanisms used to control puppets, and so on and so forth were all the work of talisman formation masters. It could be said that talisman formation masters were absolutely the top group of people amongst the various professions, and the properties of this profession caused their status and identity to be bound to far exceed others. Xianxia frowned and felt even more bored. This sort of exchange was a pure waste of time because talisman crafting wasn't used to show off or compete. The nearby Tung Lan remained silent as he stared fixedly at the movements of Wu Yifan on the arena, and his brows gradually knit together as he revealed a slightly heavy expression. Xianxia couldn't help but ask when he saw this. "Uncle Lan, what talisman is that Dance of Stars?" Xianxia couldn't help but ask this because it was the first time he'd heard of the 7 forbidden talismans. That's a way of saying things in the Talisman Emperor domain. According to legend, there are 7 steels that tower into the sky within the Talisman Emperor domain, and every single steel has a talisman diagram inscribed on it. These talisman diagrams were called the 7 forbidden talismans. Tung Lan was stunned before he suddenly realized that Xianxia had just arrived at the immortal dimension and didn't know all of this. So he explained, "This Dance of Stars is the first talisman diagram of the 7 forbidden talismans, and one is only considered as a true talisman formation grandmaster when one is able to craft this talisman. Talisman Emperor domain. The 7 forbidden talismans. The true standard to test a talisman formation grandmaster." It was indeed the first time that Xianxia had heard of this, and he was slightly curious. Just when he wanted to ask further, a wave of rumbling cheers suddenly erupted in the entire hall, and it drowned out his conversation with Tung Lan. 37 breaths of time. My God! He crafted a Dance of Stars talisman in such a short period of time. This young Master Wu's attainments in the Tao of Talismans has surely arrived at the Grandmaster level a long time ago. In my opinion, young Master Wu's attainments in the Tao of Talismans are much more formidable than ordinary talisman formation grandmasters. Because how could ordinary talisman formation grandmasters accomplish this in a time of 37 breaths? Exactly. Most importantly, the Dance of Stars talisman he crafted possesses 36 rivers of stars, and this is too much more formidable than an ordinary talisman formation grandmaster. On the combat arena, Wu Yifan had already stood up and grinned at everyone while remaining silent, because the rising and falling cheering, exclaims of shock, and praise of the guests were the best proof of his results. Xianxia raised his eyes and saw that beneath the illumination of numerous palace lanterns was a palm-sized and silvery white immortal talisman floating in midair above the table. Its surface was enshrouded by a glow that revealed the phenomenon of numerous rivers of stars that flowed and fluttered about, and it was like a dazzling starry sky was contained within it, causing it to seem mysterious and extraordinary. When he counted it carefully, the number of rivers of stars just happened to be 36. Xianxia was stunned, and actually felt a slightly familiar aura from the talisman. Where exactly have I seen this talisman? In his mind, numerous scenes flashed by before they finally stopped at the 9 steps that led to the highest level of the Grand Deduction Tower in the Talisman Dimension. No wonder. So, it's slightly similar to one of the Talisman formation diagrams left behind on those 9 steps. Xianxia came to a sudden understanding, yet he was still slightly puzzled. Because he noticed that compared to the Talisman formation diagram he remembered, the Dance of Stars Wu Yifan crafted was obviously much simpler. 37 breaths of time. Looks like this kid came prepared. The nearby Tung Lan had a heavy expression and felt that it was slightly troublesome. What do you mean? Asked Xianxia. If it's in terms of time, then there are disciples in my Liang clan that are capable of competing with him. But if it's in terms of quality, then it's very difficult to find anyone that can craft this talisman to the point of possessing 36 rivers of stars. Tung Lan's brows knit together tightly as he said, Xianxia, you don't understand. An ordinary talisman formation grandmaster capable of crafting it to the point the phenomena of 12 rivers of stars appears can already be considered to possess extraordinary natural talent. But this fellow actually… Alas, this is probably going to be slightly troublesome. Xianxia was slightly puzzled. The entire Liang clan has existed for countless years and is renowned as a clan famous in the Tao of Talismans. So could it be that there isn't a talisman formation grandmaster in the Liang clan that's more formidable than Wu Yifan? Tung Lan seemed to have discerned Xianxia's thoughts, and he shook his head and said, only young disciples can participate in an exchange of this scale. If an elder of the clan were to interfere, then it would be bullying the young and a loss of fairness. Xianxia came to a sudden understanding. While Xianxia and Tung Lan were talking, a Liang clan disciple had charged up onto the combat arena with the intention of having an exchange with Wu Yifan. Liang Bin. I never expected that he would be unable to refrain from making a moving. I heard that amongst this generation of the Liang clan, Liang Bin has already attained the Grandmaster level in the Tao of Talismans, and his attainments are so profound that no one besides eldest young Miss Liang Bing is a match for him. Exactly. I heard that Liang Bin was sent into a secret realm to concentrate in his study of the Tao of Talismans by an ancestor of the Liang clan. Why is he here? Haha. Isn't it just nice for us to have a good show to watch? When they saw the dark-clothed Liang Bing, who carried a piercingly cold expression between his brows standing on the combat arena, all the guests in the hall couldn't help but discuss animatedly. Xianxia couldn't help but ask when he saw this. Uncle Lan, how about this disciple? Liang Bin is a good seedling indeed, and his natural talent is superb. When he advanced into the ranks of Talisman Formation Grandmasters 8 years ago, he was able to craft a Dance of Stars talisman to the point of revealing the phenomenon of 28 rivers of stars. Now that he has entered into closed-door cultivation and studied for 8 years, even I'm not sure exactly what attainments he has accomplished. Tung Lan's expression eased up slightly when he saw Liang Bin make an appearance, and he pondered deeply before he spoke. Xianxia sighed with emotion in his heart. Sure enough, these are the resources and reserves of a clan famous in the Tao of Talismans. Numerous talisman formation grandmasters can even be found amongst their younger generation disciples. This isn't something an ordinary power can accomplish. Before long, Liang Bin had started crafting the talisman. His expression was similarly composed and calm, yet unlike Wu Yifan, even though his movements couldn't be considered to be smooth, it carried its own aura of swiftness that was like a dashing bolt of lightning. The atmosphere in the hall became quiet once more while the gazers of everyone converged onto Liang Bin, and they silently counted the time in their hearts. Wu Yifan used 37 breaths of time. What about Liang Bin? Everyone was filled with anticipation. Xianxia was similarly looking at Liang Bin with concentration, yet it wasn't long before he couldn't refrain from shaking his head. Tung Lan, who stood by Xianxia's side, acutely noticed this scene, and he couldn't help but ask in a low voice, could it be that there's something wrong? Xianxia thought for a moment and said, Liang Bin isn't inferior to Wu Yifan in any aspect, but there's a slight flaw in his state of mind, as if has been occupied by his desire to prevail over others, causing him to be unable to completely enter into a deep state of talisman crafting. As for the outcome, I can't confirm it. Actually, he'd spoken in a tactful manner. According to his opinion, Liang Bin would probably be on par with Wu Yifan in terms of speed, yet it would surely be inferior in terms of quality. Of course, it wasn't good for him to tell Teng Lan all of this. However, even though he didn't say it explicitly, Teng Lan's expression instantly became heavy while he frowned without end after hearing these words. He didn't dare make light of Xianxia's opinion. All those years ago in the Talisman Dimension, Xianxia was the one and only existence to ascend the peak of the Grand Deduction Tower, and he was the heir of the Oracle Mountain. Perhaps his cultivation realm was extremely ordinary, yet even if his discerning gaze and attainments in the Tao of Talismans couldn't be said to be unprecedented, it was sufficient to reign supreme amongst his peers. Subsequently, the situation really developed as Xianxia had expected. At the 37th breath of time, Liang Bin had completed the crafting of the Dance of Stars talisman. This speed just happened to be similar to Wu Yifan. Even then, it caused a wave of exclaims of admiration to erupt amidst the guests, and some Liang clan disciples couldn't refrain from cheering. But in the next moment, when they saw the talisman Liang Bin had crafted clearly, all the exclaims of admiration and cheers had vanished while their faces stiffened slightly. Because the surroundings of that Dance of Stars talisman were coiled by the phenomena of 35 rivers of stars. Even though it was merely a single river of star less than the talisman crafted by Wu Yifan, this tiny difference marked the outcome of the exchange. Liang Bin had lost. Everyone was astounded before they erupted into an uproar and discussed animatedly without end. On the other hand, those clansmen of the Liang clan were stunned and felt slight disbelief, and they felt that it was slightly difficult to accept this outcome. Wu Yifan laughed soundlessly instead when facing this scene, and his smile was extremely modest. Yet his modesty was filled with strong confidence and pride as he laughed light-heartedly. Fellow Taoist Liang Bin, thank you for your guidance. May I know if I'm considered to have slightly prevailed against you in this exchange? Liang Bin's expression was slightly gloomy as he stood up with a blank expression, and he didn't say a single word as he turned around and left the combat arena. Haha! Fellow Taoist Liang Bin is really someone with deep feelings for the Tao of Talismans. But I feel that it's only a single defeat, not to mention it was only an exchange, so there's no need to take it to heart. I hope you can forgive me if I've offended you in any way. Wu Yifan smiled lightheartedly and seemed to be extremely magnanimous, and his composed bearing caused many guests in the hall to praise him without end. Not conceited from victory or dismayed from defeat, he really deserves to be a young genius from Ice Sky Continent. At this moment, even more gazes intentionally and unintentionally drifted over to the side of the hall, and their gazes contained a different kind of meaning. On the soft chair at the side of the hall, Liang Bing's expression became slightly grim before she recovered her composure, and then she stood up and gestured to cause all the guests in the hall to instantly quiet down. The cousin brother of mine's state of mind was too inferior, and it carried the desire to prevail over others, so he didn't lose unjustly. I have to thank young Master Wu for this guidance. Otherwise he would probably be unable to improve in the Tao of Talismans any longer. Liang Bing's red lips parted lightly and drew out a wisp of an elegant grin as she said, "So I have to thank young Master Wu for displaying such wonderful ability in talisman crafting for everyone present here today." As she spoke, she started clapping lightly before all the guests present here started clapping along with her, and for a time, the sound of applause reverberated endlessly like the sound of thunder. In the crowd, Xianxia, who saw this scene, couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his heart. Liang Bing really deserves to be the successor of the Liang clan. She was able to deal with the embarrassing atmosphere in the hall with a few words and easily moved away the attention of everyone. She faintly reveals the graceful bearing of a patriarch. Wu Yifan grinned when facing the warm applause of everyone that was present here, and he cupped his fists without end. After that, his gaze moved to descend onto Liang Bing. "There's no need to thank me. I heard young Miss Liang Bing's attainments in the Tao of Talismans even surpasses fellow Taoist Liang Bin. Why don't we have an exchange? I think that everyone present here would presumably be extremely delighted to witness young Miss Liang Bing's elegant demeanor." As soon as these words were spoken, the entire hall instantly became silent as everyone present revealed various expression, whereas Teng Lan's expression sank while his eyes were filled with coldness. Acting in this way was obviously equivalent to provocation. Xianxia frowned as well, and he faintly understood that Wu Yifan really hadn't come for the banquet, but had come to intentionally look for trouble with Liang Bing. Meanwhile, Liang Bing's red lips puckered lightly while she kept silent, and this was a sign that she was about to flare up. But in the end, she restrained the rage in her heart and smiled as she shook her head. Forget it. The Tao of Talismans isn't used to put on shows. I'm not interested in this sort of exchange. The meaning within her words was that her Tao of Talismans wasn't like Wu Yifan that only used it to put on shows, and her words faintly carried mocking intent. Wu Yifan was stunned and sighed emotionally with slight regret. I traveled a long way and originally intended to appreciate the peerless ability of the Liang clan that's famous for the Tao of Talismans. But now it would seem like it's a slight pity that… What was a slight pity? He naturally felt it was a pity he was unable to find a match, and the meaning behind his words was that the Liang clan, which was seen as a clan famous in the Tao of Talismans, actually didn't possess a single person that could defeat him. Liang Bing had discerned the meaning behind his words as well, and her expression instantly turned slightly grim. She took a deep breath to allow herself to maintain her calm and was just about to speak. Right at this moment, a clear and loud voice resounded. My eldest young miss is right. Her Tao of Talismans isn't for putting up a show, and it reflects badly on her status and bearing. Since young Master Wu insists, then how about I accompany young Master Wu in this exchange? When Wu Yifan pressed down step by step towards forcing Liang Bing to carry out an exchange with him, the guests in the surroundings held an attitude of intending to watch the show, and they were rather excited and filled with anticipation. They were mostly branch clan members of the Liang clan, and they'd always been suppressed by the direct line of the Liang clan. In their current generation, only Liang Bing could be considered to be outstanding amongst the direct line descendants of the Liang Bing. But she was a woman in the end, so others feeling displeased about this was unavoidable. Presently, they had a chance to humiliate the Liang clan's direct line and strike a blow to Liang Bing's power and influence, so most of the people present were happy to see this happen. However, right at this critical moment, a loud and clear voice had resounded, and the words spoken by this person seemed to carry the intent to protect Liang Bing, causing everyone present to frown without end. They were slightly displeased and felt detest towards this person that suddenly made an appearance and threw a wrench into the situation. The crowd split apart, and then the figure of a young man and Tenglan walked out from within. Everyone present was slightly stunned when they saw the appearance of this young man, and they felt he was slightly unfamiliar, whereas the eyes of the women lit up instead while they blushed. This young man had a firm and handsome appearance. His eyes were deep like the starry sky, and he wore a light green embroidered robe. A white jade belt wrapped around his waist while he strode on shoes that carried cloud-like patterns, and his figure was tall and graceful. Every single move he made naturally carried a lofty and extraordinary bearing that drew the attention of all. This young man was Xianxia, but the guests in the surroundings didn't recognize him, and they discussed animatedly while they guessed his identity without end. Who's this young man? Why have I never seen him in the past? I don't know. I don't think there's such a disciple in the Liang clan. My God, what a charming bearing. It's simply too likable. He's obviously someone with a past. This was the infatuated words of a young woman. At the other side of the hall, Liang Bing's red lips opened slightly, while her beautiful face revealed a surprised expression because Xianxia's dressing tonight caused even her to feel that it was new and pleasant. Under Tong Lan's lead, Xianxia walked over here, and he remained indifferent and composed when facing the surprised, bewildered, or burning gazes from the surroundings. Eldest young miss, allow this subordinate of yours to seek guidance from young Master Wu's ability in talisman crafting. All right? Xianxia walked over to stand before Liang Bing, and he bowed slightly before he asked in a low voice, "Subordinate?" Liang Bing was stunned before she instantly came to an understanding. She knew that Xianxia had intentionally lowered his status, and he'd naturally done this for the sake of helping her. For a time, she was extremely grateful in her heart, because that was an heir of Oracle Mountain. Presently, he'd actually intentionally lowered himself, so how could she not be grateful? But before Liang Bing could speak, Wu Yifan, who stood on the combat arena, asked with a frown on his face. May I ask who this friend is in the Liang clan? He intentionally placed emphasis on the words Liang clan, and the meaning behind his words was that he was telling Xianxia it was better not to interfere if Xianxia wasn't a member of the Liang clan. Of course, Wu Yifan wasn't afraid of Liang Bing getting foreign aid, and he was just displeased that Xianxia had come out and threw a wrench in the situation because a fellow at the initial stage of the heavenly immortal realm suddenly coming out to throw a wrench in his plans was simply presumptuous in his eyes. Even if he won against this young man, he, Wu Yifan, wouldn't have any sense of accomplishment. Moreover, if he allowed such small fries to freely challenge him, then it would be too boring. Not to mention that it would be a waste of time, it would affect his plans for tonight. So his attitude towards Xianxia naturally couldn't be considered to be friendly. Xianxia raised his head and grinned as he said, Young Master Wu, you said earlier that anyone in the Liang clan can have an exchange with you. Could it be that I heard wrongly? Or perhaps young Master Wu doesn't dare to accept the challenge of a nobody like me. As soon as these words were spoken, all of the guests were slightly flabbergasted. They wondered where Liang Bing had recruited such a subordinate because he obviously spoke in slightly unreasonable manner, yet Xianxia's words were also reasonable, so they couldn't refute him. A wisp of rage flashed in the depths of Wu Yifan's eyes, and he was about to speak when the crowd suddenly moved restlessly. A thin young man that wore a luxurious golden robe walked out from the crowd and walked slowly over here. Isn't this young Master Liang Ping? The crowd instantly recognized the young man was Liang Ping, an outstanding disciple from one of the Liang clan's branch families. Cousin sister, young Master Wu is a distinguished guest that I invited, and I haven't had the time to introduce him to you. Liang Ping walked over swiftly to stand before Liang Bing, and he feigned a respectful and reverent expression as he cupped his fists. Then he straightened his figure and raised his head before he said in a loud voice, Everyone is aware that young Master Wu Yifan is from Ice Sky Continent, and he's a renowned talisman formation grandmaster in the younger generation that possesses outstanding talent and a boundless future. But perhaps everyone is unaware that young Master Wu is from the ancient Wu clan in the Ice Sky Continent. Moreover, he's a direct descendant disciple of the Wu clan that has entered one of the 7 great academies, the Cloud Mist Academy, a few years ago. No matter if it's strength or background, young Master Wu Yifan is perfect, and he's reputed to be one of the best candidates to become one of the blazing sons of the next generation. As soon as these words were spoken, everyone present was shocked. They were indeed unaware that Wu Yifan's background was actually so great. For a time, all of them looked at Wu Yifan in a different light, and their gazes faintly carried a wisp of respect. The 4 great continents were the most rich and powerful territories in the immortal dimension. Not only were the 4 great immortal kings residing there, practically all the top powers in the immortal dimension were spread throughout the 4 great continents. The 7 great academies, the ancient clans, the mysterious sects. It was absolutely the central hub of the immortal dimension, and it was the loftiest place in the eyes of the countless living beings in the immortal dimension. On the other hand, Wu Yifan had come from there and possessed the status of being both a direct descendant of an ancient clan and a student of one of the 7 great academies. The force of the impact such an identity and status had on the guests present here was obvious. Wu Yifan, who stood on the combat arena, smiled modestly and didn't say anything further, and he seemed to have a rather graceful bearing. Liang Bing was stunned while her clear eyes revealed a wisp of a serious expression for the first time. Even though it flashed momentarily, it was still acutely captured by Xianxia. Xianxia couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Obviously, Liang Bing has finally realized that Liang Ping had clearly invited Wu Yifan to the banquet tonight for the sake of giving her a heavy blow and causing her power and influence to hit rock bottom. Or perhaps this is a fight between the branch family and direct line of the Liang clan, and it depends on whether Liang Bing is able to deal with it. When he saw that he'd grabbed control of the atmosphere in the hall, Liang Ping couldn't help but reveal a wisp of arrogance on his face as he looked at Liang Bing and said, Cousin sister, how can you allow a subordinate to have an exchange with such a proud genius? This isn't the way to treat a guest. As he spoke, he glanced coldly at Xianxia while bluntly revealing his disdain. Meanwhile, Wu Yifan felt slightly impatient as well, and he spoke in a straightforward manner while maintaining a smile on his face. I wonder if I, Wu Yifan, a direct descendant of the Wu clan and a student of Cloud Mist Academy, am able to invite young Miss Liang Bing to have an exchange of attainments in the Tao of Talismans? Liang Bing's face was cold as ice. Her nature had always been one where she didn't like to exercise forbearance, and if it wasn't for her being the host here and had to take care all aspects, she would have flared up on the spot a long time ago. Right at this moment, Chen Shi, who stood by her side, suddenly said with a smile, "If one's status and background can be used in an exchange of the Tao of Talismans, then I have nothing else to say." As soon as these words were spoken, the guests were in an uproar because this sort of ridicule was something that anyone could discern. Has this fellow gone mad? For a time, the gazes of everyone shot towards Chen Shi, and they wondered if this fellow had been sent out intentionally by Liang Bing to cause trouble. Wu Yifan's face sank as well. This was the first time he bluntly revealed a wisp of detest since he participated in this banquet. It couldn't be helped. He truly had enough of this little fellow at the initial stage of the heavenly immortal realm, and he felt that this little fellow was like a fly that kept buzzing endlessly. Chen Shi grinned when facing all of this, and then he twisted the topic and said, "Just as my eldest young miss said earlier, talisman crafting isn't used to put on shows, while status and background isn't a form of asset used to show off with. Young Master Wu, acting in this way is slightly misguided." Just a few words caused the hall to become deathly silent. All the guests present here stared blankly at Chen Shi, and all of them felt this young man had gone mad because he actually dared to judge the young genius of the Ice Sky continent as misguided. This was simply arrogant and shameless. Liang Bing's expression couldn't help but change when she heard this, and she was just about to speak when Chen Shi stopped her with a signal. Instantly, Wu Yifan's face sank as he said coldly, "Out of respect for young Miss Liang Bing, I won't make a fuss about it with you. It's best that you mind your words. Otherwise, bear the consequences." Chen Shi didn't speak any further. He directly split the crowd apart and arrived on the combat arena to stand face to face with Wu Yifan, and then he said casually, "Looks like young Master Wu hasn't understood your mistakes. Then we'll do as young Master Wu said and determine the outcome based on an exchange in the Tao of Talismans." "Ha-ha!" Wu Yifan sneered without end as he sized Chen Shi up from head to toe, and then he laughed with ridicule. "So, you're very confident in your standard of talisman crafting?" Chen Shi smiled and remained unmoved, and he said indifferently, "Young Master Wu, my eldest young miss has been giving you face since the beginning. If you insist to do this, then I as her subordinate can only take her place to help young Master Wu realize your errors." The meaning behind his words was that Wu Yifan didn't even have the qualifications to go against Liang Bing, and he'd come here because he couldn't bear to see Wu Yifan continuing on the wrong path and had come to have an exchange with Wu Yifan. These words simply showed disregard towards Wu Yifan, and it was boundlessly haughty. It just so happened that as Chen Shi spoke these words, every single action he made revealed an aura that seemed as if what he said was a matter of fact and others had no choice but to believe it. All the guests present were dumbstruck. Where exactly did this fellow come from? Isn't he a bit too bold? Liang Bing puckered her lips and smiled instead. She was clearly aware in her heart that Chen Shi had acted in this way and didn't hesitate to offend Wu Yifan entirely because of her. As for the arrogance Chen Shi displayed, she didn't think he was arrogant at all. Wu Yifan started laughing out of extreme rage, and he sized up Chen Shi once more before he nodded and said, "Very good. It's truly rare that young Miss Liang Bing has such a loyal and devoted subordinate like you. But I only hope that talking nonsense isn't all you're good at." Chen Shi didn't speak and directly moved to arrive before the table at the center of the arena, and then sized it up carefully. The two Dance of Stars talismans that Wu Yifan and Liang Bin had crafted earlier lay on the table. "Don't worry, young Master Wu. This useless piece of trash is only cannon fodder. Liang Bing is obviously using him to intentionally waste time. Once you deal with him, I'll make Liang Bing have no choice but to be swept into this exchange. At that time, she'll have no other choice." Liang Ping's voice transmission sounded out by Wu Yifan's ears, yet it was unable to disperse the rage and gloominess in Wu Yifan's heart. He said via voice transmission in an icy cold voice, I only hope that such a fly doesn't appear again. My patience is limited, and I don't have the time to deal with a group of flies. Xianxia glanced at the 2 Dance of Stars talismans on the table for a short moment before he raised his head and said, "Young Master Wu, there's still time to stop now. Are you sure you don't want to reconsider?" As soon as these words were spoken, the expressions of all the guests became strange. This fellow is acting so arrogantly. Could it be that he isn't afraid of losing and being humiliated? A bellyful of rage arose in Wu Yifan from this provocation, and the corners of his mouth couldn't help but twitch as he glanced at Xianxia with an icy cold gaze. "I look forward to your display. You'd better not disappoint everyone." Every single word he spoke contained fury that was impossible to conceal. Xianxia nodded and didn't speak any further, nor did he sit on the chair. He picked up the talisman brush casually and dipped it in ink before he started inscribing on a piece of blank jade. As he inscribed, he raised his head and asked with a smile on his face, "Young Master Wu, have you ever seen rivers of stars filling the sky? What exactly is this fellow doing?" The guests in the hall were slightly flabbergasted when they saw him speaking while crafting a talisman. Is this fellow a talisman formation grandmaster or not? He doesn't show any professionalism at all. Could it be that he intentionally came to cause trouble? Wu Yifan was stunned. But unlike the other guests at the beginning, he was really slightly curious why Xianxia would persist on provoking him, and he felt a trace of worry in his heart as well. He was worried that something unexpected may occur, and that would make it difficult for him. But at this moment, when he saw Xianxia act in this way, it caused the last bit of worry in his heart to vanish completely, and he was fully confident in his heart. He said to himself, "Damnable fly. Just wait and see how I'll humiliate you later." In public, he grunted coldly instead and didn't pay any attention to Xianxia. He refused to be tricked by Xianxia because it would be impossible for him to explain himself if Xianxia were to lose and blame the failure on the conversation carried out between them while Xianxia crafted the talisman. So he decided to watch coldly from the sidelines and not give Xianxia any chance to stir up trouble. He believed that under the gazes of all the guests in the hall, Xianxia wouldn't have another chance to continue acting shamelessly. Xianxia was extremely relaxed when he saw this, and he casually inscribed the talisman markings while he spoke by himself. "Since it's a show, I naturally have to give everyone a pleasant surprise. Don't you think so too, young Master Wu?" Wu Yifan kept quiet while sneering without end in his heart, and he was even more confident that this fellow had no more tricks to play and was obviously intending to use some underhanded means. Thus, he absolutely couldn't fall for it. On the other hand, the guests in the hall came to a slight understanding when they saw this. They felt that Xianxia was a fellow that intentionally came to cause trouble, and it wasn't an exchange at all because Xianxia had obviously intentionally made an appearance to disturb the situation. How can Liang Bing watch as her subordinate makes a humiliating display? Could it be that, for the sake of avoiding going against Wu Yifan, she doesn't care about anything else? But if she does this, she'll absolutely be reduced to a laughingstock, and it's even more harmful to her power and influence. Everyone thought in their hearts and were unable to guess the reason. "Cousin sister, this subordinate of yours is really a weirdo. Where did you find him?" At the same time, Liang Ping had burst into laughter, and his face was filled with ridicule. "A weirdo?" Liang Bing's gaze turned cold as she glanced at Liang Ping. "I dare you to say it one more time." Liang Ping's face froze while a wisp of rage surged out from his heart, yet he sighed instead. "I know that you're protective towards your subordinates, cousin sister, but doing this is slightly irrational. Look, 20 breaths of time have already passed, yet that fellow is actually still talking while crafting. He's obviously screwing around." Screwing around? Xianxia doesn't even intend to compete seriously with him at all because he isn't worthy. Liang Bing's expression remained unchanged and kept silent. At the 25th breath of time, everyone noticed to their shock that Xianxia had suddenly placed the piece of jade on the table, and then he stood there and actually remained there without moving. He stopped. Could it be that this fellow was suddenly moved by his conscience and doesn't intend to cause trouble any longer? All the guests were dumbstruck. Even though most of them hadn't taken the path of the Tao of Talismans, They knew that it was a taboo to be disturbed by the outside world while crafting a talisman, let alone converse with someone. So they were sure that Xianxia was absolutely an amateur that had intentionally come to cause trouble. But when they saw that he actually intended to admit defeat in such an open manner at this moment and stop causing trouble, all the guests were unable to adjust to this. My God! Where did this weirdo come from? Bro, at least persist until the end? It's too cowardly to admit defeat halfway. Exactly, be a man. Haha. I knew it would be like this. This fellow is a clown that came to play tricks and amuse us. When they saw Xianxia's actions, all the guests couldn't refrain from discussing it. Some held their faces and groaned while some sneered without end. And there were some young women that bluntly said Xianxia wasn't a man. Everyone seemed to have forgotten that before Xianxia stopped moving, he'd said something to Wu Yifan. For the sake of not causing young Master Wu embarrassment, I'll choose a time of 37 breaths as well. All right? Unfortunately, everyone had directly overlooked these words. You intend to admit defeat? I won't allow it. When Wu Yifan, who'd been forcefully restraining his rage all along, saw this, he was unable to restrain himself any longer and spoke in a cold voice. Xianxia smiled when facing this and said, Wait a moment. Wu Yifan was stunned. And then he sneered. What? You're unwilling now. Right at this moment, the talisman brush in Xianxia's right hand descended abruptly, and the tip of the brush lightly tapped on the piece of jade on the table. After that, he casually tossed away the talisman brush and said with a smile, Exactly 37 breaths of time. Haha, 37 breaths of time. I never expected that you were still able to remember how long has passed. Is this the Dance of Stars talisman that you crafted? It looks like a Dance of Flies talisman to me. Wu Yifan sneered with ridicule as he raised his head, and he raised the talisman on the table. The talisman was covered in ink and completely pitch black, and one was faintly able to notice countless talisman markings coiling all over it in an extremely complex manner. It was disorderly like a child's doodle, so not to mention it didn't even have a strand of the aura of the Dance of Stars talisman. He'd decided since a long time ago that he would humiliate Xianxia terrible. So when he saw this superb opportunity, he immediately held up the talisman with his left hand and showed it to the guests as he laughed with a clear voice. Everyone, please take a look. This is the Dance of Stars talisman crafted by this friend. As he spoke, he gradually moved his figure to display the talisman towards all directions, and he seemed as if he intended to allow the guests in every single corner to see it clearly. How hideous! What the heck is that? A scribbled talisman? Haha! What a joke! This fellow is truly amusing. Everyone in the hall exploded with laughter. Wu Yifan couldn't help but smile with satisfaction when he saw this, and the flames of rage in his heart being vent caused his entire body to feel light. It was as if he was torturing and killing a pile of bustling and noisy flies, and it was unspeakably satisfying. Cousin sister, look, this subordinate of yours is really in the limelight now. Ha! Liang Ping roared with laughter while the complacency on his face was impossible to conceal. Liang Bing's beautiful brows knit together while she was slightly bewildered and shot her gaze towards Xianxia. Right at this moment, Xianxia raised his head instead and grinned to her as he said, Eldest young miss, do you still remember what I said earlier? I said that since it's a show, I naturally have to give everyone a pleasant surprise. A pleasant surprise? This really is a pleasant surprise to me. You? Before Liang Bing could speak, Wu Yifan had started roaring with laughter instead. Yet he'd only spoken halfway when his smile froze abruptly, and his eyes stared fixedly at the talisman in his hand while his eyeballs had practically popped out of their sockets. A wisp of jet-black light suddenly suffused the pitch-black surface of the talisman, and it was like a blurry and illusory veil of night that was deep and mysterious had enshrouded it. OM! A wisp of strange fluctuation suddenly spread throughout the hall, and then the guests felt something flash before their eyes, and the lanterns in the hall were already enveloped by a layer of the veil of night that seemed like a screen of water. It was like the night sky had surged into appearance and enveloped the top of the hall, causing everyone to have the misconception that they were beneath the sky in an open field. Everyone was surprised and bewildered, causing their faces to freeze. Before they could recover from their shock, They saw numerous strands of dazzling starlight suddenly stretch out from Wu Yifan, and they were like numerous rivers of stars that filled the pitch-black veil of night, causing the entire hall to seem as if it was decorated with many bright and piercingly cold stars. There were truly too many rivers of stars, and they fluttered and spun about. They swayed like a myriad of misty shadows of light and flickered without end as they filled the entire hall, causing others to feel a deep and mysterious aura from them. It just happened to seem as if they were beneath the universe and night sky while bathing under the starlight of a myriad of stars. "How beautiful!" some young women muttered with brilliant gazes, and they revealed infatuated expressions. The other guests were mostly the same, and they were dumbstruck. Even though they were immortals, the sky in the immortal dimension was boundlessly high, so most living beings didn't have the chance to wander through the starry sky and witness the flow of a myriad of stars. So when they saw such a scene, even if they were clearly aware that this was only an illusion and wasn't a true starry sky, they still felt shocked and were speechless. A pleasant surprise. This is a true pleasant surprise. This fellow is always so surprising. Liang Bing's eyes glowed as she mumbled, and her sexy red lips puckered lightly as they drew out a smile that could charm the world. Tung Lan nodded and sighed endlessly with emotion as well when he saw this, and he seemed as if a heavy load had been lifted from him. Compared to this, no matter if it was the Dance of Stars talisman crafted by Wu Yifan or Liang Bin, they were like flickering flames that were entirely unable to compete in radiance with the sun and moon. "Young Master Wu, how's this pleasant surprise?" On the arena, she spoke abruptly and broke the silence. All the guests recovered from their shock as well. Only now did they clearly notice that the source of the myriad rays of starlight was precisely the talisman in Wu Yifan's hand. The myriad rays of starlight caused Wu Yifan to seem like a god of the starry skies, and he seemed divine, extraordinary, and dazzling to the extreme. It caused everyone to be unable to look at him directly. But the expression of the guests was extremely strange because this was absolutely ironic. Just moments ago, Wu Yifan had displayed that talisman in a complacent manner to everyone, and he'd even bluntly called the talisman as a Dance of Flies talisman. Yet now, the scene of rivers of stars filling the sky had appeared right before him. When these two scenes were compared, it caused all of his previous actions to be amusing like those of a clown, and it was laughable to the extreme. This was simply like an extremely resounding slap that slapped hard onto Wu Yifan's face,